Well, good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to our regular City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz. Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Just as a quick matter of housekeeping, as an apology, after the last council meeting, I had posted on Facebook to let residents know, as I usually do, what's going on in city government. And one of the things I did that I had not done before ever was I noted the names of council members who had voted in favor of one item. And I said, please contact those council members if you disagree. Well, looking back, it was wrong for me to do that, because what I should have said is, here's the contact information for all council members. Please let them know how you feel. And I apologize. I thought there was being public record. There was not a problem with it, but the way that was perceived, the way it was taken, makes it wrong. And I apologize for that. And in the future, I will just provide information for all council members, and I won't list out people singly. So I ask the council's forgiveness for that. And with that, I will ask if we have an approval for the minutes for the regular meeting of January 3rd.
So moved. Second.
Motion and seconded. Any discussion? Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. And that brings us to agenda revisions. Do we have any for tonight, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor. Item number 16 on the resolution calendar is being removed tonight.
Okay,
So
so
it's
we
the
will,
last item on the resolution calendar.
okay. So we will drop item 16. And with that, that takes us over to special presentations. I do have one presentation tonight, and I would ask Catherine Sogard and Mr. Craner to come forward, please. Come over here, I'll grab the mic where it's at. And so this is a proclamation for College Hill. It says, for January 1st to December 31st, 2022, the year of College Hill. Whereas the College Hill neighborhood has grown up alongside the university campus to provide housing, services, entertainment, and other amenities to residents of College Hill and the surrounding community. And whereas the amenities, activities, and quality of life provided within the College Hill neighborhood and business district are important for the long-term success of our community. And whereas the City of Cedar Falls is committed to enduring and productive relationships with College Hill Partnership and all community stakeholders to ensure that College Hill is resourced and supported as a crucial component of our city's overall success. Now therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim 2022 as the year of College Hill to spotlight this neighborhood and business district, and I do hereby strongly encourage community focus and resources for the continued development and improvement of College Hill. And I do further commend civic efforts to attract and retain neighborhood residents and to support quality housing, employment, and excellent quality of life amenities in this distinct and important neighborhood district. Signed this 11th day of January 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. So I'd like to present this to you both.
Thank you very much. On behalf of College Hill Partnership, the businesses, the neighbors, everybody involved, we greatly appreciate this. We need a lot more awareness of our area, and we look forward to taking it forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So now we move on into public forum, where speakers have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Sometimes we have the public comment on items that are occurring or will be discussed later on. You're welcome to discuss at either point or both, but just be aware of that. You will have that opportunity during public hearings and during the rest of the council items to speak on any item you wish. So with that, I'll open up. If anyone wishes to come forward to speak in public forum tonight on a topic. I see Rosemary Beach, if you'd like to come forward, ma'am. And just please provide name and address for our record. Oh, yes, please. Sorry about that.
Is that about right? Okay, does that
Yes,
work?
ma'am. That sounds
Okay.
great.
Rosemary Beach, 5018 Sage Road, Cedar Falls, Iowa. And I'm so glad I get to follow the College Hill thing, because I have taken a trip through Shirley's house on College Hill that is being discussed for demolition. And I have found it very interesting that most people don't know anything about it. One of the reasons I think is they call it the Honors House. And they say, oh, they're going to demolish the Honors House. Who in the heck knows what the Honors House? I bet I could ask this whole group up here and you really wouldn't know. But you know what the Shirley House is. And you know that it's been there since 1890. Now, the university wants to take it down for open space. I have sent in the information to the state of Iowa about a building that is on the demolition list or whatever, and that should be published shortly. I'm also met with the Historical Society yesterday, and they're going to write a letter in favor of having some kind of conversation about demolishing that building. I'm in contact with Michael, I've lost the last name, it's gone out of my head. Anyway, who is the head of the demolition with the information with the Regents. I'm going to ask to be on the Regents' agenda and be able to speak on that house. And what I'm coming for is to just tell you, I don't know how many of I've showed you this before, who need this book. If you're a person in Cedar Falls who supposedly is going to worry about Cedar Falls, you really should read this. Peter Melindy put it together 100 years ago. That's 100 years of Cedar Falls history. And you know that the city of Cedar Falls, with its community foundation, has a Peter Melindy Award. We also have a Peter Melindy Park. We also have a Searly Park. We have a Searly Boulevard. We have a Searly building on the campus. It's the library. Searly's a well-known name, and I think if we started thinking about the demolition of the Searly House, the Searly House is open at any moment that there's school, there's people in it. They'll give you a tour, and you can see what shape the house is in. Now, we have not been able to have a conversation with you and I, basically, because I think the Historical Preservation Commission was told they couldn't do that. And I think that's an unfair situation. I was on the Historical Preservation when it was started, and I remember two of the council members, who I will not name, and I probably have said this before, that came afterwards and said, because we wanted to save the old post office. And they said after we were put on, we had a commission, I had coffee with them. You probably couldn't have coffee today, I don't know. But in any event, they said, why would you want to work on that old post office? Why do you want to save that? And I said, you just made a commission to save things in Cedar Falls that were important to us, that meant something to us, that meant what we really are. Why wouldn't we do that? That's what you gave us the commission for. I'm asking that the commission be able to contact and be part of a conversation with you and I, and to be part of the whole affair. I'm asking any individual who feels inclined to send a note to you and I, or the mayor, or anybody else who thinks is going to help here, to tear that building down on the campus at UNI is really an absolutely terrible thing to think about. This says the president's cottage is a pleasing brick structure placed at the entrance of the grounds. It is 2 stories high. It is a permanent building well adapted to its purpose. All the buildings are heated by steam. A union plant connected with a 6-inch water main with city water works being provided, which carries water to every floor for fire protection as well as daily use. And so forth. It's 15 acres is devoted to the campus. It talks about all of that. And we've gone through the fact that the only reason the university is here is because of the Civil War orphans. We took them in, we built a building 3 miles from downtown, and we put the orphans in it. When there were not any orphans, or a few, they sent them to Devonport. And the people of Cedar Falls went down to Des Moines and requested a college. And that gave us our college. And I think—
Mrs. Beach, you're at time, but I'll give you an additional minute.
Okay, I think that the importance to our community to keep that at the head point is something we need to do. So I would like to see it be an entrance information place. It's glassed in on the porch. You could have a miniature museum in there so people could wander in and see what UN is about, a map of the area, a welcoming place. It's a beautiful house, and it's in a great, great spot to be highlighted on the university, not torn down. So I'm asking that the Preservation Commission be allowed to be part of this. Whatever we do, it's not an argument, it's not anything. I mean, we're arguing with the university, and you don't win many of those. So I think it behooves us to allow the Preservation Commission to be part of whatever's going to happen with this building. I spoke briefly.
And you are at time.
Okay, I am out of town. Okay,
Okay.
I will leave.
Let's do 30 seconds. So.
Okay, well, that's what I want done, basically. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Beach. Thank you. So, does anyone else wish to speak from the gallery in public comment? Or if I'm controlling the Zoom tonight, if anybody wishes to speak from Zoom, you can press *9 on your phone, or there's the raise hand icon. So I'll keep an eye out for that as well. So, Ms. Wilson, good evening, and
Good evening.
Name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Dawn Wilson, 3620 Round Street. I just wanted to take my name off of the petition that I did sign. And the reason why I signed the petition originally was to keep conversation going, show support for my neighbors. But I do feel like my name, being on that petition, is being used for individual interests only and not as a whole. So I just want to go on record saying that I revoke my name from that petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Todd DeBoer, 1305 Delta Drive.
Good evening, sir.
And history was mentioned, so I want to talk about the history of our signaled intersections. I was driving around today, and it has brought me great concern with speaking with the elderly, the roundabouts. A lot of people have trouble going through them. If you're an aggressive driver, they're fine. If you're a timid driver, sometimes you're overwhelmed. But even more concerned about the pedestrians. There's one controlled crossing on University in front of John Deere. What about children on bikes? What about families walking with strollers? What about shoppers? There's no controlled crossing for Valley Park residents to go over to Hy-Vee. And now 18th and Main is going to be roundabout. What about the joggers? What about the families walking? Seems like they've been forgotten. You know, if you're in a car, and I did see some crosswalks right adjacent to the roundabouts. And if you're coming around a roundabout, you're watching the road, and then boom, all of a sudden you got a crosswalk right there. Whoever implemented those crossings right there at the roundabout, Evidently, I don't think they were thinking, you know? You come around a roundabout and you're doing a 270, you have no idea who's crossing. And then, like I said, there is one controlled crossing. Are you guys gonna put controlled crossing on Main Street? Has anyone thought about it? You know, pedestrian versus a car. I lived in California for 25 years, and you always yielded to pedestrians. Now you're gonna have, what about wheelchairs? What about people who are physically and mentally challenged? They waited for that light. They waited for that sign to say walk. I wouldn't want my kids, if I was in a wheelchair, I wouldn't want to try and cross. You know, so I think those people have been forgotten about. And I know the roundabouts, I like them out in the country. They're great. Traffic flows smoothly. They work pretty good on University too. But people without that security of a car, they're on foot. On foot in a car, you lose every time. So I want to know what people are going to do about, signaled, controlled crossings. And that's my comment tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. And council certainly will take that under advisement as we look through conversations about roundabouts and signalized intersections, the values of both. So I appreciate that feedback. Anyone else wish to speak for public forum tonight? Yes, Ms. Bear. You need no introduction, but just give name and address for the
Kim
record.
Bear, 3815 Union Road. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing to say that. I'm going to address item number 12 on the agenda. Due to a personal conflict, I need to hit the road, but there is a letter in your packet on behalf of Community Main Street. I'm going to just read it with a couple of additions. On behalf of Cedar Falls Community Main Street and our Board of Directors, we would like to express our opposition to the proposed resolution of a moratorium on all building permits in the Cedar Falls Downtown Character District through May 1st, with the additional support of Grow Cedar Valley. A moratorium on building permits would result in a detrimental impact to the economic vitality of not only our downtown, but all of Cedar Falls. This would hurt the great momentum of our downtown district, and the negative impact could have long-term effects in regard to recruitment of new businesses and a short-term impact disruption of the improvement of existing properties and tenants and the ability of owners to sell their properties. The Board of Directors recognizes that there are stakeholder concerns with parts of the current code. Rather than implementing a moratorium on new and redevelopment, the board encourages council to discuss possible amendments of the code that will be in line with downtown's current parking concerns. I also want to share that a current property owner with a property for sale has had serious interest in their property. But since the mention of the moratorium, no offer has been made until the buyer is certain that it doesn't pass. So the current issue is actually it just being on the agenda and being part of the conversation is affecting downtown. So that's all I have to say. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Ms. Bear. Anyone else wish to speak from the gallery for public forum tonight? Yes, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Name is James Burtis. The address is 421 Main Street. I just wanted to come up and say I appreciate what the council did earlier in protecting personal property rights. I understand that parking is a difficult subject to try to work out. I hope you all continue to remain creative and pursue it to find the best possible result while still protecting people's individual rights to their property that they pay for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hertz. Other speakers? Okay, seeing none in the gallery for now. I do have one hand raised on Zoom, and that's from Josh Wilson. So I'm unmuting now. And Mr. Wilson, if you could just give name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. You're just fine.
Awesome. Josh Wilson, 100 East 2nd Street, downtown Cedar Falls. Just wanted to chime in briefly. First of all, a big thank you to you, Mr. Mayor, and the council members that responded to the email that I sent on the subject that I would like to speak about tonight as well, and that is on the concept of shared parking, which I thank you for discussing tonight, and I certainly hope that you continue to move forward with making that an optional thing to have downtown. To me, I'm all for a lot of the things that I hear council talking about. I'm all for being creative. I'm all for paying for parking. If any of you saw what I paid to live downtown, you'd know I pay for probably far more than the one parking spot that I have. And the concept that someone like me who works remotely would ever have to share my parking spot, which is a condition of my lease, is just absurd. I also have lived in Washington, D.C. and other big cities around the country, and I agree with council members that say, walking and ride sharing are kind of the ways of the future. I would argue they're kind of the ways of current times right now. However, there's a big difference between other cities and Cedar Falls. For example, here in Iowa, we have something we have to deal with every year. We're dealing with it right now. It's called winter. We just had a pretty big snowstorm that hit the area this past weekend, which might be the reason downtown wasn't as busy as it normally is. And so cars are utilized quite a bit more in the state of Iowa just for reasons that are really outside of our control. I mean, I live downtown, and I'll tell you, I didn't even want to walk as far as Main Street in the snow that hit this weekend. So there are things that I think we need to take into account. First, again, the fact that people are already paying for downtown. In fact, there's a lot behind my apartment building at one point had parking in it for you to pay for, and then the council got rid of that, and now it's something else. It changed so frequently that it's somewhat confusing down here. Other cities, as well, as one of the council members mentioned, have gotten very creative with the way they put in parking ramps or parking structures underground. You can put parking garages in the middle of buildings that have storefronts on the front, and you can't even tell that it is a parking garage. So I think there's plenty of ways to get creative that don't involve the concept of sharing a parking spot in a small Midwest city like Cedar Falls that doesn't have mass transit like I could use in Washington, and doesn't have the luxury of weather that we can walk in all the time or even ride a bicycle. And as far as being neighborly and learning to share, a good concept, I think. I don't know that it's all that realistic. I know many people have garages in the city of Cedar Falls, and I wonder if the council were to pass an ordinance when people are at work during the day, if I could maybe move my car into the garage in the winter over at your house, if that concept of sharing would be looked on with the same Mr. Rogers attitude of neighborly friendliness as shared parking downtown. So I appreciate you guys bringing that. I do think it's a huge property rights violation, and I also think it's just silly. And as far as the moratorium, real briefly, I get kind of a headache watching some of the work sessions and council meetings, because there is a lot of, what I would call bickering back and forth and delaying. I share the frustration that certain council members have with repetitiveness of topics, but I think we have a new council in place right now, and if repealing form-based zoning or making changes to it is the goal of those council people, I think it needs to be put on the next agenda and discussed, debated, and voted on, and moved forward. The concept of a moratorium downtown is putting a very cheap and inefficient Band-Aid on a bigger problem. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for those that responded to my email, and I hope that we just govern. Let's get the tough decisions talked about now out of the way now that we have a council in place, and not entertain any of this silly Band-Aid politics that a moratorium would be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. And I have to ask, too, can you hear us okay from where you're at? We sometimes have technical issues.
It is, it's okay to hear. The people wearing masks are a little muffled, but I understand the need for that. But other than that, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, with that, yes, ma'am.
So just a clarification, if we want
And
to
just
speak,
name and address for the record, please.
so my name's Jenny Leeper. Thank you for having me. 205 Main Street. Is this where we want, if we want to address the moratorium, should we make our comments right now?
It's better to do it during the moratorium section so
Okay.
that when we compile it together, it's all
That's what I thought.
a
So
nice,
thank you for that.
nice package and you.
I'll be back.
No prohibition against doing it. I would just recommend doing it during that item. So other comments from the gallery, last call? Okay, seeing none and seeing no others from Zoom, just mute Mr. Wilson again. Okay, so with that, and let me lower his hand. It's our first time going back to having me do the Zoom, and that saves Julie from having to be up here. So there we are, all set. So with that, that'll close the public forum and bring us over into our special order of business tonight. The first item is number 3, which is a public hearing on the proposed FY22 to FY27 capital improvements program. So is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Do we have any written communications filed on this item, Madam Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I'll bring it over to staff comments first, and I believe that would be Director Jen Rodenbeck, if you'll handle that for us. Just a brief synopsis of what we're looking at tonight.
Sure. So it is the hearing tonight on our 5-year capital improvements program, or CIP. The CIP has about 200 projects on it for a total of about $350 million. As council's aware, there's been a couple steps in the process before we've gotten here tonight. Obviously, through the goal-setting process, one of the things we do is try to get from council what are kind of the parameters to build the CIP, what are the priority projects. So getting that information from council just helps staff develop the CIP. And then at the last council meeting on January 3rd, there was a presentation to council and the Planning and Zoning Commission to just highlight a few projects on the CIP, talk about the impacts on property taxes, what our current debt limit is. Also just, reiterate that we know the CIP focuses a lot on infrastructure improvements, but we also try to look at quality of life projects as well. And so, again, before you tonight is that CIP and also the reimbursement resolution that we do every year as part of that process as well. And the CIP was included in the packet, so if anybody from the public wants to see it, it would have been in the packet for tonight. And then if it is approved tonight, the final will be put on the website as well.
Okay, thank you, Director Rodenbeck. With that, I'll turn it over for public comments. If anyone from the public would wish to speak on this item, you'd have up to 5 minutes to talk about the CIP. So I'll open it now for your one opportunity to speak on the capital improvements program. So does anyone from the gallery wish to speak on this item? So I will note, I know that there was some interest from the public about an item being re-added. I don't want to tip the scales on it, but this would be that one opportunity to talk about that item, the one appropriate opportunity. So I just don't want to shortcut anybody accidentally. So yes, name and address for the record, please, sir.
You bet. Ryan Creener, 4407 Donald Drive in Cedar Falls. And that one line item is number 54. We are a little concerned that that specific line item is going to be taking away from finishing the College Hill vision plan. And we've had a lot of people that have put in time with consultants, with each other, to figure out what is this going to be for the next year, 2, 3, and so forth on. And if that's not included in this, then when does it get back into the plan? When do we finish this design, look at the zoning, and continue to make College Hill and the College Hill area a desired place again? And we've got a petition here that we did send out to people that are fans of College Hill and want to see this change, and this followed through. I'm happy to leave it here. I'm happy to take it with me, but there are 89 people on there in a short notice. I got a little behind the 8 ball on getting it out, but one is from Waterloo, the rest of them are all from Cedar Falls. So a lot of desire, and I think if I would have been a little bit ahead of the game, I would have gotten more. But please take this into consideration. There's already been a lot of time put into it, and I'm just very worried that if we sweep it under the rug, it never comes back, and could be a scary moment for College Hill. Please back this and add 54 back into it so the vision plan gets through. Does anybody have any questions for me specifically for that?
Well, typically for questions to public comment, we don't normally have that. It's a speak-in.
You bet.
Are you speaking on behalf of College Hill Partnership?
For myself, yes, I represent College Hill Partnership. They obviously would love to see this focus come to College Hill as well, but primarily this is for myself.
Okay. So when we get to the part where council is going to be discussing that resolution for approval, if they wish to have a speaker or representative speak, they're welcome to do that.
Okay.
But thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And does anyone else from the gallery wish to speak on this item in public comment? No. If we could just stand at ease just for a moment. So the request from the city clerk was that for that petition, since that is a public petition forward, if the city clerk could receive a copy of that, she can add that to the official record as well. Thank you. So yes, Dr. Martin, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Green and members of council. My name is Chris Martin, and I'm a homeowner and resident of College Hill. I'm a worker on College Hill. I'm a landlord on College Hill and a founding member and past president of the College Hill Partnership. I write to urge, or actually speak to urge, the support of reinstating the CIP budget line for fiscal year 23 for the comprehensive planning and zoning updates for College Hill District. I understand the desire to complete the revision of the zoning code for downtown, but it should not be at the expense of finishing the process for College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District as well. Along with many other volunteers in this neighborhood in the city, we spent years and donated hundreds of hours for a very transparent and very public visioning process for Imagine College Hill. If the funding for fiscal year 23, which begins July 1st, is not reinstated, there is no funding to continue and complete this work. The process will be dead for at least the next year and a half, according to one of the council members. I urge you that there should be no moratorium on development in College Hill. In fact, for the good of people in Cedar Falls and College Hill, council should be asking how the process could be expedited, not slowed. There should be no surprises here. This process has been going on for longer than the pandemic. Remember those days before the pandemic? That's when we started this process. It's been going on a long time. So please don't let development on College Hill stop cold. Hundreds of people in the neighborhood want a better College Hill and have given their time and effort to make that happen. So I would urge you to respect that time and effort of all those people, all the citizens of Cedar Falls, and reinstate line 54 for full funding for comprehensive planning and zoning code updates for fiscal year 23. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Give me Dr. Favos, name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Bettina Favos. I'm at 421 West Searly Boulevard on College Hill. I'm a resident of College Hill and a board member of the College Hill Partnership. Thank you, everyone, for letting me speak today. I was one of the many people who donated hundreds of volunteer hours for the Imagine College Hill public visioning process. We did all this excellent work and with input from hundreds of people. Finally, we have a clear vision for the redevelopment of College Hill. Yet now, Council has taken out the funding line for fiscal year 23, which would delay any work for at least a year and a half. We're tired of the constant delays and efforts to undermine this process. University of Northern Iowa is Cedar Falls' largest employer. The health of College Hill is essential to the health of the university and the city of Cedar Falls, and we need this vision plan to happen. I urge the City Council to please reinstate full funding for comprehensive planning and zoning code updates. We're ready to move forward on College Hill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fabos. And asking for if there's additional comment, do we have, so we don't have the same comment over and over. It's up to this point, it's been new points brought forward, but I would just ask to keep that in mind too, that we're looking for new comments as well, and especially if anyone would wish to speak in support of the CIP as it is at this time, just for balance. So with that said, if other people who wish to come forward, you're welcome to. Just name and address for the record, please.
Hi, everyone. Hannah Chrisman, 624 West 20th Street. I'm a resident of the College Hill Overlay and also the vice president of the College Hill Partnership. In the opening paragraphs of the adopted Imagine College Hill Vision Plan, you will find the line, College Hill could be better. At the College Hill Partnership, we often describe the Hill as the front door to the university, but also the front door of Cedar Falls for university students. And right now, that front door needs a fresh coat of paint. True gateways convey character and create a welcoming environment. And while I often feel that the city of Cedar Falls does not appreciate what the university brings to our community, I think even more so, we don't appreciate what the College Hill Overlay has to offer. Every day I see the faces of College Hill walk by my front window. There are students, residents who have lived there for decades, young families with little babies and their dogs. We are a vibrant community who are eager to see the Imagine College Hill Vision Plan come to life. By leaving item number 54 off the CIP, you are showing us that our neighborhood, our businesses, the place we call home is not a priority to you. 1 year does make a difference. Another group of students will leave, more residents will seek out more attractive neighborhoods, and this area will continue to fall further and further down the list of priorities of improvements waiting to happen. As a resident of the College Hill neighborhood, I am asking you to please approve the $150,000 to begin the process of moving College Hill to the top of the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chrisman. And I will call on Mr. Grant next on Zoom, but before that, does anyone else wish to speak from the gallery? And we'll sort of prep up Mr. Grant. Yes, Mr. Deibler. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name's Dave Deibler. I live at 1616 Campus Street in Cedar Falls, of course. I run a couple businesses with my wife at 2205 and 2209 College Street, Mohair, Pear, and Octopus. And I'm going to go against what you said earlier, Mayor. I'm exactly saying what everybody said, but I think it's important that we show that there's a force, that there's a bunch of us on College Hill who, to defund this right now, the visioning process, is just, it's a nightmare to me. You know, we've been participating in this for 2 years. We need to move forward. If there's a neighborhood right now that doesn't need a chilling effect on new building, it's College Hill. You know, we need to move forward with this. I mentioned I own a bar. One of our regulars, Skip, is like, you know, College Hill is just, you know, I think his word was bomb, ready to just explode in a good way. And that's what it is. And we don't need to tamp it down right now. We need to go forward. And I would just urge you to think about what Cedar Falls and College Hill needs right now, and that's funding the vision process, okay? One last thing I want to say is I reached out to 3 council people in regard to this issue. Only one, Dave, could write back to me. If you don't have time in 2 weeks to answer an email or a phone call, then maybe you're too busy to do this job. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Deibler. And now for Mr. Grant. You just unmute you here. It looks like you are unmuted. So can you hear us okay, Mr. Grant? Not allowed to talk here.
All right, there we go. Maybe
Perfect.
I was muted. Maybe that was my fault. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Just name and address for the record, please.
Okay, good. Yeah, David Grant, 2010 Clay Street. Sorry, I'm getting my streets confused. Yeah, I just want to also add my 2 cents into saying that we need to have this line item back. I had a class that I was teaching that I had students come in and work on some of the re-envisioning process and help with that effort. I think sometimes there's a perception that College Hill kind of competes against downtown, and I just have not found that to be true at all. I think that in fact the two are synergistic, and we need to think of them both together. We've heard from others how there's a chilling effect with downtown being discussed on the debt moratorium. And I think the same sort of thing is being conveyed to anybody who wants to do any developing or is looking at potential development of College Hill area simply by saying we don't want to go through code. That really gives people pause and tells them to stay away. So as I sent out to every single city council member, it's really not your job to pick winners and losers. It's your job to really help all of us participate in a very free and honest market, not one that's tilted toward one or the other. And the only thing I would really add to is that that includes city council members who may have certain vested interests, might want to look at their vested interests and perhaps recuse themselves from a vote because they may financially benefit. So I would urge you all to have that conversation. I realize that ethics is something that is discussed and is part of council, and it may be technically okay, but I know there's at least one person who the perception at least is that that person may benefit from this. So they ought to recuse themselves. With that, I would say just please let's add that in and let's be fair and free to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grant. Anyone else from public comment tonight in the gallery? Yes, ma'am. Dr. Haubecker?
Yes, hi, I'm Becky Haubaker. I'm at 2309 Iowa Street. And I'm also a founding member of the College Hill Partnership, and I've lived in the College Hill neighborhood almost all of my life. I've seen the neighborhood and the College Hill, business district wax and wane over the years. I'd like to start by thanking the mayor for this proclamation making College Hill this year the year of College Hill, and I ask the council to enact that and to make it true. I want to thank the council for the items in the CIP that do invest in the Hill, that the investment in the Searley Park improvement, the Olive Street box culvert, the streetscape improvements. Those are all important things that add to the quality of life of the neighborhood and the Hill. But what I'm concerned about is the economic development of the businesses on the Hill. And when I live very close to you and I work there. When I walk to work, I walk by some empty storefronts. I mourn the loss of, anchor, long-time businesses like the OP. I'm sad that the healthy mix of businesses that I grew up with are now a lot of vape shops. And I would like to see more revitalization of the Hill and economic development. I, along with many of my friends and neighbors, participated in this visioning process, and I'm inspired by the Imagine College Hill Vision Plan, and I'm excited about what the Hill could be. And it can't move forward without those changes or consideration of changes to code and zoning. And I know that there are still issues to resolve. I know that there are conflicts that have to be worked through, but without that funding as a placeholder, it's not going to happen. You know that. Yeah, I know people have said, oh, we could always vote to put it back in. But I don't know that that's ever happened. And if you care about College Hill and you're honest about trying to enact that vision plan, then I ask you to return that funding for item 54. Like, preserve the potential that we could work through those other issues, that we could make this happen. Or be honest and say, no, I don't agree with the vision plan. I obstruct it, I challenge it, but let's be honest about what we're trying to do. So thank you, and I hope that you will agree with me that College Hill is worth saving and investing in, and that the economic development on the Hill is important to include in the CIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haubaker. Anyone else from the gallery wish to speak tonight? Seeing no others on Zoom. So, yes, Mr. Vajpayee. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Ishan Vajpayee, 3831 Convair Lane. I guess tonight I'll be wearing my Concerned Citizens of College Hill hat, who I have generally represented before. Just listening to some of these issues, I think actually having been involved in some concerns about the downtown visioning process that just got talked about at 5 o'clock, I don't think that the people that wanted to pull the funding from the CIP on this, first of all, I present that this whole insinuation that then you're anti-College Hill, and I'll get to why. But it's not being anti-College Hill, it's legitimate concerns about the process that took place with the downtown visioning and the downtown form-based zoning code review, and wanting to make sure that those process problems aren't repeated on the Hill until some of those process problems get worked out, which we're doing very painfully now. And I bet we don't want to have to do that again when the College Hill rezoning comes up. So I think that's a big impetus behind pulling that funding, which is to not let that snowball start to roll just quite yet, until we get some of those kinks worked out. As I said, I represent concerned citizens College Hill who have decades of presence on the Hill in terms of their business ownership, their development, millions and millions of dollars invested. So the College Hill Partnership is great work, but the idea that if you don't want what they want, you're anti-College Hill, and they're the only stakeholders on College Hill is just insulting to my constituents. So it's process concerns. I don't know how not starting a study to revise the code equates to a building moratorium. In fact, 2 years ago, the parking requirements on the Hill were reduced significantly as a compromise position to allow more robust development. And one of those is going in right now. I mean, the site plan was just done. So I also want to maybe trigger some thought here. Big anchors on College Hill are gone. It's vape shops now. Businesses are empty. I just had a meeting with a very prominent, long-term business owner in Cedar Falls who says the reason they're not on the Hill anymore is because they didn't have enough parking. And that's what College Hill Partnership wanted, was less parking. And that's what they'll get if this keeps going, because that's what they want, more, less parking. The Razor's Edge. I used to get my hair cut there when I was like 2 years old. Probably got my first haircut there. I'm 36 years old. Why is Razor Edge not there anymore? We heard it from Karen Bigelow Baker. No parking. Not enough parking. You know why vape shops are popular on the Hill? Because college kids can walk to the vape shop.
1 minute remaining.
So let's tone down the scare tactics. It's not a building moratorium. It can be put back in. It's primarily to avoid recurrence of the huge process problems that occurred with the downtown visioning process. You don't hate College Hill if you don't agree with the College Hill Partnership. And it's not the apocalyptic scenario I think that it's being painted as. Let's just take a little bit more time and breathe on this one, like we didn't do on downtown, and maybe we'll avoid some of those bitter fights later on down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bajpai. Anyone else from the gallery wish to speak on this item? And we do have one time to speak per item. So had you done before? Okay, yeah, so he had spoken previously. It's been a while since we started this part. Okay, he's got the petition forward, so thank you very much. Yes, Catherine Sogard, name and address for the record, please.
Catherine Sogard. I'm at 330 Columbia Circle over in Waterloo. So I really don't have a horse in this race besides being the executive director of the College Hill Partnership. And since we were brought up, I think honestly, I've got a lot of board members here, but I think I can speak on behalf of 100% of the board that we don't believe that if you don't agree with us, that you're anti-College Hill. I'm going to put that out there. We don't, I think that was what we have felt, and that our organization is founded on the fact that we brought a lot of different people together, landlords, neighbors, students at UNI, and business owners together to serve on a board so that we could talk through the contentious issues and so that we could listen to each other and compromise and not necessarily say, if you don't agree with us, we don't care about you. I think a few things that the College Hill Partnership wants the public to remember is the Imagine College Hill project was a vision plan created by our community, by our neighbors, by our friends. It provides local and national experts our vision for the future of College Hill and the surrounding area so that they can draft zoning code to help foster that vision into reality. That vision can't become reality if we keep the zoning code that we currently have. By not allowing funding for the zoning code updates for FY23, it's more than likely that development will be hard for the next 18 months. We saw that happen previously, that kind of the brakes were put on certain developments when potential code changes might come up. We saw that happen several years ago. And I think one thing that we need to remember, we hear form-based zoning, it's the end of the world. But a lot of notable resources shine a light on what form-based zoning is. It's unlike, so AARP.org quotes it to say that unlike conventional zoning, form-based zoning code offers the following benefits. Instead of dictating or limiting activities, the code focuses on such elements as parking locations and limits, building frontages and entrances, window standards, streetscaping, and building elevations. This is specifically important to remember when it comes to mixed-use development in business districts in College Hill. Another quote from the city of Marshall.com, form-based zoning focuses on building form as it relates to the streetscape and adjacent usage. It encourages mixed uses. It relies on the design concepts and patterns intended to preserve the assets of the character of the community. And I think to wrap it up, the College Hill, we want to improve College Hill. I think all of us would admit we have a lot of work to do in many aspects, but we're up for the challenge, and I think you saw that by the outpour of support today and with the Imagine College Hill. We want to make College Hill better. That's our desire. So.
Thank you, Ms. Sogard. Any final comments from the gallery tonight? Yes, Mayor Brown.
Jim Brown, speaking on behalf of the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation. We office at Gravitate at 2nd and State Street. The CFEDC, as we've mentioned last fall, cares about the development, the advocacy for development throughout the entire city. And a few thoughts came to my mind from the previous speakers. First of all, this is a de facto moratorium. If you don't think a developer, and it's not someone local, it could be from 200 or 300 mile radius, that maybe they do something in Normal, Illinois, maybe they do something at Drake. If they have other extra capital that they're at least thinking about doing development on the Hill, because they know that world, they know the university, they know the college student, they know the nuances of the businesses that need to be there. And look at Ames, they exploded on Lincoln Street. It's an amazing facility there as far as first floor commercial, upstairs residential, and indeed having the parking. This is, lack of funding is a de facto moratorium. We often talked years ago about the process. I know that council in years past wanted the public involvement, whether it be for a river improvement to raise $500,000 for those kind of costs, or whether it was the blood, sweat, and tears of people putting things together as they're organized as we've seen tonight. That process has been done. These stakeholders have taken the time and the effort and the blood, sweat to at least keep this ball rolling. The previous speaker was spot on with form-based zoning. It is the easiest to tweak because a couple years ago we went through how many iterations to build a $12 million building that we lost, in essence. At least it's been delayed for many of years because we couldn't park 30 cars. It'd be fantastic to have that kind of building right now, especially in fact of what the Hill looks like right now. It's old, it's tired, it's up to our city leadership to put the mechanisms in place. Let's to have those debates, but with this lack of funding, we can't even get there. The CFEDC hopes to put in a lot bigger vision than replacing the OP. a lot different vision than making sure that we have, a parking spot per bed, whatever the case might be. The bigger vision is to look at what can be as opposed to what we're seeing now, especially with the lack of funding. I would encourage a council member to amend this motion to include this funding. Thank you. To amend, that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. With that, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in public comment tonight? Seeing none, that will close our public hearing. I'm just checking on Zoom. We've got no others. So that will close the public hearing on this item and bring us over to our resolution, which is 3E, a resolution approving and adopting the FY 2022 to FY 27 capital improvements program. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
The motion and seconded. And open it up. Yes, sir. Councilmember Harding?
Normally we talk about these things and we vote and I leave it, but this is so important. I got a call literally 2 minutes before I sat down from people. I got calls constantly. This funding is vital, and I realized the downtown thing had some hiccups and we're doing that, but we're talking about it, we're moving forward. College Hill doesn't have to do with downtown. They're both great areas. College Hill is vital to the city, and it's just so important. So anyway, I'll get off of this. I don't need to say that. People have said it. I want to make a motion to amend the CIP to include item 54 and move it back to funding in fiscal year 23.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Open that amendment up for discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Cyrus.
I have a question here. It shows $150,000 every year to fiscal year 27, which adds up to $750,000. Now, when College Hill came in and wanted the $180,000 study, as you guys remember, I was just fresh on the council. And I said, who wanted this? And you guys jumped up and said, we do. So I voted for it. So I don't mind spending $150,000, but my question is why does it show $150,000 every year for the next 4 years? That's my question, because there's a lot of things in this CIP as I go over this stuff that I don't agree with. And when I first voted for the CIP, anytime during that year when I'd vote no, I would hear, well, you voted for it in the CIP. So I've been very much careful ever since then. Now, I don't want to take up the time. I happened to miss goal setting for the fact that I had COVID, but there's a lot of things in here that could be cut or moved around. If truly the $150,000 would move College Hill ahead. I love College Hill. I used to go to the pet store when I was just a little guy to see the parrot. That was in about 1963 or 4. But it's changed a lot, and it always will. It's always kind of a changing situation up there. So to spend the $150,000, I don't mind. I'd like to know why it goes out for the next 4 years, and that's my question.
Yeah, and then I'll ask as a follow-on question to that. That $150,000 pushed back, does that, if it were brought forward, does that take it out of FY27 then? Like, was it just pushed out and it pulls in?
I think why we initially, even starting last year, had the dollars amount in every year was because we thought what was going to be the next area for a vision plan. You know, we had downtown, we had College Hill. Was there going to be the next area to do that, whatever that area is? And so that's why we put it in for every year. Now, to answer your question about, you know, sliding it up, moving it out, I mean, we really can do what the council directs us to do. Obviously, the funding source for that is general revenue. So the impact will be is if it's added in for 23, that will impact the general fund for the upcoming budget when you get to the point of approving the budget. Same for whether it's 24, 25, 26, 27. So that is how that works in terms of the funding and how it will impact.
And would you then look to remove another item or several items in order to get back that $150,000? Would you be recommending other things, maybe that are less priority, or?
Well, I think the challenge right now about that is we haven't necessarily heard what's a less priority when you go down that column and what's funded from the general fund. So when we would bring the budget forward, if it was approved tonight to put it back in the funding, what we would bring forward probably through the budget process then is to ask, okay, if we include the $150,000, here's the impact on property taxes. Or we could trade, just like you mentioned, is there things listed in the FY23 column that are funded with general fund that you want to take out? And so it would offset that. Those are really your options. And we can do that through the budget process. Obviously, as you know, the budget's going to be coming up at the next meeting. And so that's why we kind of need to know tonight what's kind of the direction, because it is in the FY23 column.
Right, and we did talk in staff meeting this morning that there's the option of having a special meeting if we need to discuss where that additional funding would come from or how we would get that 150 if this were passed. So just keep in mind, like, we're not just forced to go right to the budget. If we do need to have that discussion, we can do that as well. Councilmember DeBoer.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, so this $750,000 is not all to be spent on the zoning plan or code update for the College Hill, Imagine the Hill area, which is actually not just the Hill, but 100-plus blocks. It's for $150,000 from several different areas. So one of the $150,000, the Hill one, has already been spent because we already had Merrill Fadson, whatever the name is, do that. So the other ones might be to do, say, University Corridor, it might be for Green Hill Corridor, it might be for Southern Cedar Falls. We don't know exactly where each of these different areas was, but they were not all intended to go for the College Hill.
That's correct.
So opening for other council discussion on amending the CIP to include item 54 as the funding for FY23, that $150,000. So
Another
further
question.
talk? Yes, Councilor DeBoer.
So putting a pause on spending the 150, we still have 150,000 for FY22, which I don't know if all of that was already spent or if part of that goes for the first half of this year. That doesn't actually, it gives us time then to actually decide what we wanted to do for the downtown area to make corrections or changes to the coding, and that's why it was pulled off.
Okay, well, and so yes, it's a statement then?
Correct. I was trying to explain. That's why it was taken off, was because we wanted to look at the downtown one and make corrections and changes before we went ahead with maybe 5 more different areas of town, not just College Hill, but we're talking all over town where they might be looking at this type of zoning.
So one question I have as a follow-on to that for staff is, if this funding were restored for FY23, and it's not listed in the CIP that it's targeted toward College Hill, but that's the understanding, is that's the next amount of work that's needed. Is there an obligation or a trigger that because it's added in, it has to be spent if we haven't solved the issues with the downtown to the council's satisfaction? Or is this more a placeholder?
Remember, the CIP is a planning document. So just because you vote for the CIP in its entirety doesn't necessarily mean everything in there has to come forward, or as an individual, if individual projects come forward, you may not agree with those. So it is just a planning document, and that $150,000 would be in there as an agreement came forward for the council to vote on.
Okay. If this were added in, what would the next item on the agenda be that council would consider? Would it be to contract with Farrell Madden, I would assume, for like the actual zoning changes, and then council would have the option to say, no, we want to hold on that, or we don't even want that to come forward?
Well, if I recall correctly, the visioning portion of this has been received, filed, and adopted. And so moving forward with that would be the actual putting together a code that would allow that vision to happen.
Okay, well, I guess
I'll just add on to that.
Do we not want to have that, or is there a risk that it could sneak through, that we might end up with zoning changes and the money spent, even if council didn't want it at the time? Or do they have to approve something in council, say, yes, spend this money on zoning ordinance changes?
Well, I just wanted to clarify that the visioning contract did include zoning work for the College Hill area. So the reverse, if there were not funding, then we'd have to revisit that contract. But to your question, Mayor, of something not coming before the council, that wouldn't be the case. Any zoning changes would be discussed, just like the contract was.
Okay.
And maybe what it is, Mayor, is if this is added back in, or if it's delayed, whatever it is, if the council wants to sit down and look at the goals that they set at the beginning of the visioning process again, to look at and say, hey, you know, I don't like this, I do like this, and revisit those goals before the zoning code was enacted or started, we could do that as well.
Okay. Councilor Harding?
Yeah, I think that we're pushing ahead with downtown changes. We're looking at them. We've already given a consensus to go back to planning and zoning on 2 things. We're taking action. Hopefully, we'll have something and we'll be moving forward by summertime or before summertime. And then if we don't have this funding placeholder there, then we're just going to sit on our hands and we won't have the funding to then move forward with the next thing. And that's the point, is that we're working forward. We've learned from the past. We have options, but we need the placeholder there for when we're ready. Otherwise, we get there and it's like, we have no funding, we'll just wait another year. You see what I mean? The placeholder, it's vital, because I feel confident that we're going to get through the downtown, and we're going to be ready to tackle College Hill, and we'll move through that, and we'll talk about it. So to me, it's really important to have it there.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to have an answer to what is remaining of the fiscal year 22 funds for this rezoning. And did I hear correctly that in the vision plan, there were code drafts provided for College Hill already, or we owe money for that?
No, our contract with Farrell Madden included the visioning process and then the subsequent anticipated action of zoning ordinance revisions, just as we were doing with the downtown.
Okay. And how much remains of 22?
I don't know that offhand.
Is it closer to 150 expended or closer to 100 expended?
We can get you that information after we look it up.
Okay, other questions, comments for just the amendment
Mr. Mayor.
itself to include 54? Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
I guess for clarity then, staff is saying that the zoning process for the Hill has been funded already.
A contract was approved, anticipating we would be following CIPs that we had in place.
So the money that's left, that we think there might be some left, would apply to zoning, presumably the next step.
We wouldn't want to get into the zoning until we can verify that if we're going to put a pause in 23, if there's enough in 22. It's unlikely, but we can take a look at that.
Okay. Well, I think it's very important that we do indeed revisit the visioning process, because we have different council that's changed since this was discussed. But, you know, I want to say for sure to the folks here that I have no intention to sweep under the rug any items that are viable that's discovered through the visioning process. So whether this is funded or not funded, whether we continue at form-based zoning or not, anything that was discovered as a concept, an idea, gateway, all those things are very viable and very wanted and will be acted upon. So it was the comment earlier, one comment that kind of struck a spot is the process problems that we have downtown. The process on the College Hill was almost identical. So we got to work through those time frame. If we work through them quickly, then we can restore funding through the next year. It's pretty easy. It's not a large dollar amount out of how many $1 million is in the total CIP.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor.
I think the important thing to reiterate here is time. The time is important to remember. Kicking the can down the road only hurts the folks that are already on College Hill. It delays possible development. It makes places not want to play with us because we have a reputation of being a nightmare to work with. So time is important. Yes, it can always happen, but it needs to happen sooner than later.
Okay. The tricky spot I'm in procedurally is I fully understand and appreciate the importance of dealing with the downtown issue, like the questions about shared parking and all that. We want to have that in place before we move forward with the College Hill zoning ordinance, I think, because otherwise we are going to deal with the same, the pain that we're dealing with downtown. We would just repeat. So that doesn't make sense at all. So that's why I had the question about what steps then are in place. What does council approve at the time? And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like there's not a formal mechanism that would be used to say to Farrell Madden, yes, go ahead with the next iteration of with the College Hill zoning ordinances. That's what the contract's already approved, and this would provide the funding to do that. So I would want to know what I can do as a mayor I don't just want to give a verbal acclamation that, no, I won't allow this to go forward until we have the problems resolved with downtown, which I think can be resolved in a couple of months. I wouldn't trust any politician with just what they say. I'd want something in writing. And I don't feel like I have that mechanism here. So that's where I'm kind of tied. I want to be able to commit to not moving forward, but I want to know how I can commit to that, or how I can, on paper, commit to that legally, or have the council commit to that through a proactive funding decision, if that makes sense. Yeah, looks like Mr. Rogers, comment?
Well, if you're asking if you can put a stop to the process of developing a zoning code or amendments on College Hill, you just direct the contractor not to go forward. It's as simple as that. Or terminate the contract. So what's in place right now, it doesn't mean that there's going to be a final product of new zoning code on College Hill as we sit here tonight. That's council and mayor's in charge of that. You can put a pause on it.
Mr. Mayor.
We just heard from you, so Councilor Harding,
I think, as with everything, we're getting like really complex. We've already given consensus to staff to not move forward with anything, with actual plans until we sort out downtown. So that's where they're at. My point is, if we sort out downtown, which I also have faith that we will, we're not going to have the funding there to then say what Mr. Rogers said. Now we can go ahead. And pulling that funding out, as opposed to, we need to budget the funding so that when we sort downtown out, then we as a council can say, let's go ahead with College Hill. Otherwise, I'm going to refer every single council meeting for that $150,000 once we sort out downtown. And I'll put it in the packet.
Councilmember Cruz.
Mr. Rodebeck, Director Rodebeck, as we go through a typical year and we come across something where we need money, 100,000, 200, 500, what's generally the process that we discover or find money, or how do we fund things through the year that might not be in the CIP?
Sure. So, of course, every year in the spring, you'll see us bring budget amendments forward, and those budget amendments can, include a variety of things. And sometimes it's just, people being able to move things between their budget. Maybe something's underspent, something's overspent. Or let's say we've gotten a grant to do something. We bring a budget amendment to show we're going to have extra expenses, we have extra revenue to offset it. It does get difficult during the year when you want to add things that are truly an add. And a lot of times we may come to council and say, hey, you understand by doing this, that may be that we will have to, delay another project on the CIP. We've come here and said that before. We've asked, is there some kind of other funding source you want to use? In other words, do you want to use reserves, cash reserves to do it? And knowing that that's what you did, and then the next year, we may have things that impact the budget the next year. So, I would say there's a variety of that, and usually we're doing that through the budget amendment process. But if we were going to move ahead with the contract in here, I think we would want to know that if the funding was not approved tonight, if it wasn't, then when the contract, or when we talked about, are we on pause or are we moving forward, the next step we would probably come back to then and say, okay, council, because you didn't approve the funding, now where do you want us the funding to come from? Delaying another project, using cash reserves? How do we want to do that? Now, one of the things I just want to offer up is, I don't know for the council is, you know, if there's any merit in saying maybe you want to put in the CIP half the amount. You know, maybe you know it's going to take some time to sort out some things, so you're doing that. Maybe you know that there's, again, I don't know off the top of my head how much we've spent so far on the process. I'm just trying to offer up if there's a compromise to say, hey, here's half the funding. We may get to it, we may not get to it. It doesn't have as big an impact to budget for it, so I'm just offering that up.
Well, can I ask a question as a follow-up to
Councilman.
that? Since there's, let's see, it was 50,000 in TIF funding and 700,000 in general revenue funding. So you've already got 50,000 that's available through the TIF funding that wouldn't affect the tax rate or the budget. Isn't that true?
True, so for the College Hill and downtown, we identified TIF funding because we thought those could be things that came out of TIF. Now, obviously, if we get to other corridors, you know, that's why they only showed the general fund in future years. But you're right, we could decide to pay for more out of the TIF, the College Hill TIF, and not use the general fund funding since this is for College Hill. So I think that's what you're maybe offering up is.
Well, or what I was thinking was if this came up in, say, in August, we've got everything resolved and we wanted to move forward with funding, we've got the leftover money from '22, which we don't know how much that is.
Sure.
But then we also have the 50,000 with the TIF funding. So there's money there. We don't need to add it in at this time because it's actually already there. Correct?
And maybe the best time to decide that also then would be, as you know, usually in November, we're certifying our TIF debt. So that might be then, if that's, you know, the option is, then it would be recognizing, okay, here's, letting everyone know, here's what we're also certifying for TIF expenses.
I'm just looking for an option
Yeah.
where it doesn't require redoing the entire CIP or taking out other projects to put money in that we're not going to necessarily use for the next 6 months, especially if we have money already sitting there.
Sure.
And I'll just follow up from that earlier conversation about the control mechanism to make sure we're not moving forward. To Councilmember Harding's point of the fact that it's a council consensus that we're on pause, that answers my question. Because that's an actionable direction for staff to have the consensus not to do it. It would have to be a council consensus that we're not on pause anymore than to proceed forward. So that resolves my concerns. Councilmember Cruz?
So along the lines of the TIF thoughts, the TIF is at 50,000 sitting there allocated for the College Hill currently. Does it increase then twice a year when the taxes are paid by property owners, or is it, I'm assuming that's when most of the taxes are paid by people usually, but.
Sure. So anytime you're going to add anything to the TIF, and when we certify TIF debt, really what that does is just, if you already have the full amount of the increment you're using for other projects, it's just going to extend the life of how long it's going to take for those TIF, you know, for that to be in the TIF and not flow out into general property taxes. So in terms of does it increase the rate, I guess the answer I would say is no to that. But again, it does affect the TIF, how long the TIF is active, how long it takes to pay off the TIF. But again, that's why I thought maybe if that's what the wishes were, that when we do the TIF certifications in November, then it would be easier to tell you at that time, okay, here's where we're at with the College Hill TIF. This is how much debt we have. Here's what we're going to certify. If we want to certify more to do more for College Hill, you know, then you would kind of know all those impacts at that time.
So the certification is when you balance the books and say this is what's left and now we can add to the 50 and make it 75, or is that what you mean?
Well, at that time is when we present to council what we're certifying and what's the balance on the TIF. I mean, we do that as part of that whole process because we also have to file our annual urban renewal reports at that time as well. So my point is, it's just a nice time in terms of seeing that whole picture of TIF and its impacts.
And just as a point of order, if I could ask for the conversation in the corridor to be moved elsewhere or the doors closed. It's a little distracting up here to catch all.
Thanks, Jay.
Now you just bear with us for a moment. Okay, continue. Thank you. Yes, so where were we? For additional comments from council or questions? We are on the amendment right now. So this is simply an amendment to add in that 150,000 into the FY '23 section of item 54 in the CIP, $150,000. Any final council comments or questions? Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded simply to amend. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so by voice acclamation, that did pass. And so that item is restored in the final discussion. It's not approved yet. That's what we're going to be doing now. So now the motion on the floor, as amended, is to approve and adopt the FY '22 to '27 capital improvements program with that addition of the item 54, 150,000 for FY '23.
Mr. Mayor.
Final discussion there. Yes, Councilmember Cruz?
If Mr. Gaines could clarify, maybe, or whoever, earlier you said that this is a guiding document. So if, usually in a guiding document, we receive and file the CIP, not adopt and approve, because adopt and approve puts it in stone that these are the numbers. Receive and file is more general. Am I carrying it out too far? Jennifer?
Well, I would tell you the way that the staff looks at the difference between receive and file is the council receives it, files it away, and isn't actually directing staff to go forward. In receive, file, and adopt, you're taking that document and saying, hey, staff, use this as a working document to move forward with. Now, in this particular item, as the mayor had mentioned, we know that this is something that we're not going to start until we get direction from the mayor and council.
Okay, so also, I'll just note for housekeeping's sake, we are back at the original motion as amended, and if there are other questions or concerns about other items in the CIP, this would certainly be an appropriate time to bring those forward. So, Councilmember DeVere?
Well, can you explain now how you'll have to redo things to add that back in?
Well, as I was saying that earlier, that if that's added on, which I think that's the amendment was to add it back in, so as we're getting the next step in the budget process, that will be part of what we will be able to describe to you is, okay, if it's general funded, then that will have this impact on property tax increase. Or, so really the next step you're going to be talking about it is probably through the budget process.
Right. So to follow up on that question then, if you had another item that was not in the same year, but it's in FY '24, if we would remove that, would that help anything?
Well, the problem with the general fund, since it's funded out of the general fund, is we have to set a budget each year for that.
Right.
So the problem is when it's in '24, that doesn't necessarily help when we're setting the budget for '23. Where other funding sources, like I'll pick, local option sales tax. If the money doesn't get spent in it still sits there. So that's kind of easier to do things between years than the general fund is.
Because I had been looking, we talked about that item 61 last time as to whether or not if we took that out, I see it was moved to '24. If it was taken out at all, completely, would that then help with the funding loss that we now have for that 150,000?
Well, it probably wouldn't for FY '23. What you'd have to do is look through the column, FY '23 column, and look to see what else is funded from general fund revenue. But again, like we talked about, through the budget process, we can talk about and describe to you, okay, what that impact has. Just for example, this is the percentage increase. If you add the 150,000, this is what that percentage increase to residential is. Or these are the things we can swap for that. So, we can come prepared for that to talk about the budget.
Okay, certainly, because I'd rather see us what we have to swap.
Sure.
Because I don't want to raise taxes on the public for this.
Sure.
Councilor Harding?
For Ms. Rodenbeck, this has been in the CIP in past years, and it was just this year that we pushed it back, correct?
Correct, because again, based on the conversation and goal setting.
So based off what Councilmember DeBurr is saying, that we're moving it back, since we shifted it back, did we actually take anything and put it in for 150,000?
Well, you will see anything in yellow.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, I'm just trying to think that if we've budgeted for it and it's been in the CIP every year and now magically, we're not actually adding anything because we've budgeted for it every single year.
No, I think what the difference is just what we talked about is CIP is a planning document. So you may recall in the presentation 2 weeks ago is that one of the things I said is, once the CIP is approved, we're going to take everything in the FY23 column and put it in the budget.
Put it in the budget.
So to say something's in the CIP and we've budgeted it, well, not really, because we're only budgeting for the current column.
Yeah.
So to say, again, something's in the CIP, like out in FY27, and we've already budgeted for it, well, we haven't. Now, what we have done is when we developed the CIP, is the GO funding, we've tried to balance to make sure that impact on property taxes is level. You know, we have the peaks and the valleys, so one of the things we're trying to do is that general obligation bond to try to balance that out.
I see what you mean. I guess what I'm not being as clear as I am trying to be, I apologize, is that since this has been in the CIP in the past, we have had it in the budget before, correct?
Well, if it was in that column.
If it was in that column for that year.
Right, so for FY22, the 100,000,
Yeah.
150, that was budgeted in FY22, correct. So anything past, your answer would be yes. Prior to FY23, yes, it's been budgeted for. Anything from 23 and forward
it
has
hasn't.
not been budgeted
Yes.
yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus.
One last thing. It's not the different items. It's a $350 million budget over the next 5 years. That's what I find so disagreeable. Not one certain thing or number 54. If you guys need money for your study, that's fine. I think it should only be out 1 or 2 years. So we really had time to look at this stuff because at goal setting, I don't know how many hours I spent this time, but my guess is about 16. $350 million is quite a tremendous amount to look through and decide what you were good with. I sat down and slowly went through this stuff, and I find a lot of things that I disagree with, and that's why my vote will be like it is. So that's all.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Cruz.
So the item 61, where we postponed sample plans for residential building types, you know, what I had Googled at the last meeting, $12.99 for blueprints and so on, and the comments by one of the architects that says these plans are going to be customized for the end customer anyway to a great extent, and that can be expensive. I'd like to just totally eliminate item 61 entirely from the CIP, so I make a motion to that effect.
I'd second that.
Motion and seconded, open for discussion. Seeing none, then it's been motion and seconded to remove the sample plans item, was it item 61, entirely from the CIP. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, let's see a show of hands then. All in favor, aye being to remove it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those to retain?
Five. There's five.
5? Okay. And then nays? 1, 2. Okay, so that does pass, and the sample plans would be removed in this amendment. Okay, so now we're back to the original motion as amended, which includes funding for the CIP of item 54, $150,000 for FY23, and removing item 61 entirely. So any further discussion? Councilor Perdue?
I just want the minutes to reflect that this is a multi-year planning document, so that if we vote to approve it, it does not mean that we are approving of every item in here, that those would be done separately each time that item came up.
Certainly, yes. So this doesn't commit the city to those final projects. Those do come before council again. So any other discussion on the CIP? Councilmember Schultz.
So for the 40,000 that we just got rid of, would that be applicable that to the 154 or the 50,000 from the TIF, or do you still look at that as straight up 154,000?
So that was so that was funded by general fund for the FY24.
Different years, yeah.
So it will be next year's budget that it would help in terms of if we're not budgeting it for it next year, it would help when we're balancing the budget for next year.
So do you have just off the top of your head, for every $100,000 that we spend, what's the impact to the citizens on taxes?
So for about every 110,000, that's going to affect about 0.5%. So in other words, if the impact on residential was going to be 0% and you add 110,000 on, it's going to be a 0.5%. So they'd have a 0.5% increase.
I'm not sure but what Gil's asking, and for the new council members, they're either going to, by adding this item in, they're either going to have to raise taxes, that 0.5%, or they're going to have to be something in the document that's
To
under
give
the
and take.
GO or GR funding that we'll have to take out.
Okay.
For the year 22 or 23?
23. We're actually in 22. I know, it gets confusing.
Okay, any final discussion on the CIP? Seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded to approve and adopt the FY22 Capital Improvements Program, amended to include the addition of item 54, 150,000 on FY23, and removing item 61 entirely. Motion and seconded, and requires a roll call vote.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So the CIP does pass for tonight, which will help us in the budget planning documents, and that does include the funding for College Hill in FY23, for that 150,000. So with that, moving forward into item 5, it's a public hearing, item 4, resolution declaring official intent under Treasury Regulation 1 TAC 150-2 to issue debt to reimburse the city for certain original expenditures paid in connection with specified project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. I'll wait for a few moments if anyone wishes to leave. I can give you a moment to do that. Okay, thank you. So as we're on item 4, does council, it's been motioned and seconded, does council have any initial questions for this item to staff? Okay, seeing none, then open it to the public. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Okay, also seeing none. I'm seeing none on Zoom. So it's been motioned and seconded. Any final discussion? None. So motion and seconded, and it requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And I always try to do that of going initial questions, council, or public questions, discussion, final council discussion, and then a vote. I try to stick to that. Sometimes I miss it. So that's item 5. That did pass, or excuse me, item 4 did pass. Item 5 now is a public hearing on a proposal to undertake a public improvement project for the Main Street reconstruction project and to authorize acquisition of private property for said project. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications filed?
Mr. Mayor, I have no written communications on file.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Open it up for staff comments tonight. And is that, I guess, Mr. Wiki, we give the floor as our city engineer. So, Mr. Wiki.
All right, thank you, Mayor Green. City Council, tonight's public hearing is on the Main Street reconstruction right-of-way acquisition. The city's planning to reconstruct Main Street from 6th Street to University and convert an existing 4-lane to a 3-lane roadway. Included in the project will be the intersections of Sierra Lee Boulevard, 18th Street, and 12th Street, which will be converted to a single-lane roundabout to improve the overall traffic flow. Project will also include improvements to the water main, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, sidewalk, and other miscellaneous roadway items. This project shows the need for some fee title acquisition from approximately 9 properties and included potentially up to 3 total takes. And those would be at the intersection of 12th Street, the northwest corner, the northeast corner, and the southwest corner. And then in addition to that, approximately 145 temporary easements. And if Denny could, I have a strip map here, broken up into 3 sections just so you can kind of zoom in and see a little bit better. This is from 6th Street to 12th Street. The blue shows the permanent acquisition, green is the temporary easement, and red is city-owned property. Next section is from 12th to 18th Street, and then the section after that be 18th to Saralee Boulevard. Now what I'd like to do is come back to the 12th Street intersection, and you know, at a previous meeting, council had some concerns about the potential of the total take at the northeast lot of that intersection. So what staff did is that we kind of took a look at the alignment of that roundabout and see if we could, you know, move it around or shift it to lessen the impact to that property. And conceptually, what we think we're able to look at here is that we are able to successfully shift that roundabout alignment to lessen the impact on that northeast corner property. So I just wanted to give you that update, and you know, unless directed otherwise, this is the direction that staff is moving forward with. Just to go over the schedule a little bit. Currently, we are in design and right-of-way acquisition. That'll occur through most of this year. We intend to have up to 3 public meetings, and in the fall, when we have final design, we'll come back to the committee of the whole for an update on the final design, with the intention of having a bid letting in December of '22, and then construction will occur after that in spring of '23. And due to the size and scope of the project, you know, the construction will be phased out over the next 3 years. Then to just go into some of the cost and the funding on this, consultant services are estimated at around $2 million. That includes the roadway, culvert design, right-of-way services, and construction services. And then the construction cost estimate on this is $12.5 million, with $2 million of that dedicated to the culvert replacements. There's many funding sources on this project, as you can see, and just to note, this project has been fully funded, and to move forward with the design. And just to kind of reiterate this, the schedule of this project is closely tied to the state and federal funding, so we want to, you know, keep this project on track and keep it moving forward. And that concludes my presentation. Hand it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Weeke. With that, I'll bring it over to public comments. If anyone wishes to speak on this item, this would be time to do so in the public hearing. So yes, Mr. Martinez, so probably name and address for the record, please, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Michael Martinez. I live at 1124 Main Street, which is the northeast corner that you guys are currently talking about. So I just want to, since I was last here, it was kind of emotional because you were talking about condemning my property. So I had a chance to talk to both the city engineer as well as the other landowners across the street, and shifting that roundabout, I think, is going to save my property. So I want to thank the council members for reaching out to those landowners and the mayor. So I'm hoping that you approve that, and that if you do have to acquire those properties, that it's not 3, that it's just the 2 properties that that the city project manager discussed. I guess I'm looking forward to the project. I hope it's done tastefully. It is still a residential area. On that side of Main Street, you kind of feel that you know, there's not that much consideration for historical homes on that side. One example is when I first moved there, when I retired, and I moved there, it was a rental property, and I took it over and started my restoration process. And there was a grant available for painting or for, for building improvements, but it actually stopped on half of the street of Main Street, and I'm not really sure why, but the funding was only available for the west side of Main Street. So I think that your historical homes in that area do need, some attention and sidewalk improvement and things like that. And so I hope that those things are also things that you guys consider in the future. And thanks again for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak on this item? And also, if you're on Zoom and you wish to speak, just press *9 or the raise hand icon.
Ryan Greener, 4407 Donald Drive again. Just a question on, can the design of the 12th Street roundabout change from what was on the screen? I'm one of the owners of the duplex that is going to be purchased, and then the one right behind it is one of ours as well. So I just have a little bit of concern of the design. I saw one design that would stop some access points in and out of that alleyway, which would kind of severely stop the flow for that rental that's left there. So I don't know if the design is in discussion right now or not, but.
Okay, so with public comment, I'll take a note of that.
Okay.
And then when we get to the council.
So just keep that in mind. I would like access for the alleyway is all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments from gallery? Yes, sir. Name. Yes, you can always speak on any new item. It's
Okay.
completely fine.
Todd DeBoer, 1305 Delta Drive. And I just want to stress the consideration for pedestrians, because I don't think that has been met. Like I said, there's one signaled crossing right there by John Deere. And if you guys go ahead with your plans on Main Street, you've also got an entrance to the bike path, walking. There needs to be more consideration. I just was talking with someone earlier, and they also commented the crossings that are just right there by the roundabouts. You're heading north, and you want to go west. You're going past one exit, and then the next one, you can't see somebody over here. You're watching the cars. They're just too close, and there's been no consideration, I don't feel, for pedestrians. So if you guys go ahead with your plans, you need to look out for those who are unprotected, and that's a person on foot. And I know you guys want to promote family values. Well, you're not going to let a couple 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds go riding their bikes and cross those intersections. I wouldn't. So the council, I just hope that you will consider the person on foot who's unprotected. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from gallery? Yes, Mr. Vodka.
Ishan Vajpayee, 720 Main, that's the property I'm talking about, that's the one I own. I really do like this project, shocking, right? I question though, what's the anticipated impact on sidewalks along Main Street that are gonna have to have the temporary easement on it? It kind of seems like maybe there's gonna be heavy equipment running over those, I don't know. Is the city gonna rebuild those? Or even if they're not totally destroyed, is the city thinking about redoing those sidewalks along Main as a beautification type thing to make it match the nice new street we'll have? So that's just my question about the sidewalks along Main. So.
Thank you, Mr. Vajpayee. So we'll hold the answer for that until we get into the out of public comment, but for Mr. Wiki, if you can just keep that in mind for an answer. So anyone else from the public wish to speak? Evening, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Darrell Slinker, 1907 Main Street. We're right on the plans of the 18th and Main roundabout. in your last December meeting, someone evidently called in at the very end and said, what's going on with Main and 18th? And the comment was, we're cleaning it up, which it looks better. It's cleaned up. So December 14th, the chainsaws are buzzing. So we highly consider, or one should reconsider 18th and Main roundabout. It's difficult enough trying to back out of our driveway with the stoplights. You have them coming down the hill, heading east, turning right onto Main. Then the same situation. They're coming from the other way, right across the street from our double driveway. Of course, is Edward Jones, the mini strip mall. Hanson's Dairy is over there. So about the time you think you're going to get out, oh, I got a chance. Well, here's somebody coming from Hanson Dairy. Or they're scooting through that parking lot. Then all of a sudden you think, okay, got another chance. My property's next to the 8-unit apartment building. So there, you got somebody coming out of there. Then you think, okay, got another chance. Well, they're coming out of BK Tiling, semis, everything else. A person from the past, OMG, Mr. Skanes once said, at 18th and Main, you have turning signals north and south. It works. Why not take that money and do the same thing, turning signals east and west? Just prolong them. You can widen it out a little bit. You've gained the space by cleaning out the creek bed there. I don't know why that wouldn't work. It's just been really difficult living there and trying to beat the traffic. A roundabout would be crazy. And going down from 4-lane to 3-lane, that's going to make it worse. We're never going to get out of our driveways. Never. Former council member Mark Miller once said in a comment in the paper way back when this all started, I sat at 12th Street. I sat there and sat there. Well, I always want to say, Mark, come on down to my place. Come down to Tom Vetter's, my neighbor, and try and get out of our driveway sometimes. So that's all I really have to say about it. We consider it.
Thank you, sir.
Take that money and give it to College Hill.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the gallery wish to speak? I'm seeing none on Zoom. So with that, if no other public comment, then I will consider the public hearing closed for item 5 and bring us over to 5E, which is a resolution approving public improvement project for the Main Street reconstruction project and authorizing acquisition of private property for said project. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Motion and second, and now it's open for council questions and discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Cruz.
I guess to Mr. Wiki there, on the 2 of the 3 properties, the northwest and southwest, that's pretty much decided, or is there variables there that would change for Mr. Martinez's house? I mean, he's out of danger, pretty much.
So as the conceptual design is laid out right now, Mr. Martinez's property would not be a total take.
Okay, thanks.
And then since you're up here, we have those questions from earlier about the access for that property, rental properties. Is that something that can still be addressed in the design phase?
Yeah, that's something we can look into for sure.
Okay, so it's good to know that's a concern, and so that can be kind of dealt with over time. And then the second question.
Sidewalks.
Yeah, the impact on, thank you very much. The impact on sidewalks that Mr. Bajpai had asked.
Sidewalk replacement is part of this project.
So during the time that the sidewalks are not operation, or they're taken up, is there going to be other access for people to walk on that area? Like how would pedestrians get through that corridor? Would they just have to avoid it entirely?
Well, they'd have to probably walk on the other side of the street, or,
Okay.
you know, one side or the other, because there will be impacts to wherever they're currently working at that time.
But is the intent that they wouldn't have both blocked off at the same time then?
That's something that we could probably stage out in the plans.
Okay. Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Dunn.
So I often wonder when people talk about the concerns of crossing roundabouts or areas of roundabouts on foot and as pedestrians and on bikes, if they've ever actually done so. I've said before, I live in the Valley Park neighborhood. University Avenue is right in my area. I'm a multitasker. If I can figure out a way to entertain my kids, get groceries, and get exercise all at one time, I do it. So oftentimes we walk over to the movie theater or to the grocery store, all those areas. The other night I had to come down to the car store or car place down here, so I decided to get some exercise and walk down Main Street. So I guess what I'm getting at is if you've ever actually walked through a roundabout, it's actually quite, as a parent, when you're crossing with your children, it's less scary. So I often say to my boys who are, Tucker's 13 and Wyatt is 8, I tell them specifically, the older kids, to cross at the roundabouts and not go down to Main and University Avenue when they're going to the pool, specifically because of the kind of intersection that is. Either you go to the roundabout and cross there to get to the pool, or you get on the bike path and cross that way. But I often say when we're going over to the movie theater or to the College Square Mall area, that I said, it's nice that we only really, we should look both ways because you never know when somebody's going to do something silly. But I said, isn't it nice that we really only have to worry about traffic coming from one direction? Then we get to the middle, and then we cross the next. It's much safer. So if you have not actually crossed at a roundabout or walked in these areas, I encourage you to do so before you fear for your safety. The other night when I was walking down Main Street for the 4th or 5th time this week, I crossed at 12th Street, and the person who was coming through the intersection, I would say they ran the red light. I think they thought they were going to beat the yellow. But people, I feel like they do at those kinds of intersections, accelerate. And, obviously I'm paying attention, but just imagine, at least in a roundabout, yes, accidents can still occur, but you're naturally slowing down, where in a typical traditional stoplight, we all know that there's the people that think they're going to beat it, and accidents do occur. I know that, I say don't live in fear, but those things do happen. So to say that a roundabout is not as safe or is somehow dangerous is simply not true.
Well, thank you. And I wrote note that comment too about the no consideration for pedestrians, where it's very much pedestrians are considered in these proposals. And same as Councilmember Dunn, I've biked across from through the university intersections, and I feel so much safer being able to stop at that center island and only looking at one lane of traffic. I get to the median break, and then I can look at the other side of traffic. So I would feel much more comfortable with my kids crossing that than a 5-lane straight intersection that's signalized. That's anecdotally. Yes, Councilmember DeBerg.
Can you remind me, I know we talked about this before, but out of curiosity, if there were no roundabouts, would there be any property acquisition that was a total acquisition?
If the corridor was reconstructed with signalized intersections only, no roundabouts, then I don't believe there'd be an impact to right-of-way.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Harding?
Well, I was just going to say, what if we did 18th, where we expanded the turn lanes to both directions, or would that, you probably wouldn't know if that would, off the top of your head, if we would have any acquisitions that way?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to say.
Understand.
There's minimal acquisition at 18th Street intersection. City
With
owns 3 of the corners. Yep.
Yeah, I was just curious if we had, if we extended turn lanes on both sides, if that would possibly create more than we have right now, if that makes sense.
Okay. Other questions or comments from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Cyrus.
I'd be for that. Get rid of the roundabout you're saying, Simon, on 18th Street in Maine.
I wasn't necessarily saying get rid of it. I was just curious if we looked at that option, because we don't have that much of a take and right away right there. I was curious if it would possibly cause more of a take because of the redesign to the intersection. I just didn't know.
Because I'd be for stoplights on all those intersections. That's all.
Other questions or comments? I have that concern that I brought up previously about the taking of 1124. And it looks like the alternative proposal will not do that, that there's a partial take, just a small piece, but not the building or the house itself.
Correct, just a sliver of the property.
And for what's being approved tonight, is that the proposal that you're bringing forward? Because I saw in the council packet that it showed the version that had all 3 properties being taken. So I just want to clarify that what's being voted on tonight is the one that doesn't take that property.
Right.
Right.
The reason we showed them all is that we just want to show, the potential of what the total could be. So that's why it was shown like that in your council packet of all 3 of those properties.
Okay. So, but to restate the question then, when the council votes tonight, if it's approved, is there no chance that the full property would be taken? Or are you still having that option?
No, I believe we would move forward with the concept that I showed you for just those 2 property acquisitions on the west side.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. So, any other council questions? Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded to, approve the public improvement project for Main Street reconstruction project and authorize acquisition of private property for said project. It's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Five voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass as designed. And brings us to item 6, which is a public hearing on the proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the West Viking Road Industrial Park Phase 5 project. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication? Motion and seconded. With that, do we have any written communications filed, Madam Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So for staff comments, we have Mr. Matt Tolan. So, Mr. Tolan, the floor is yours, sir.
Did we take a vote on we need to receive and file proof of publication?
Oh, I didn't take a vote on that. Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded to receive and file proof of publication. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that passes and brings us back forward to staff comments. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Mayor, City Council. Tonight's public hearing is for the West Viking Road Industrial Park Phase 5. This project consists of mass grading, a 200-acre industrial park expansion. Construction in the first phase includes 20,000 square yards of concrete, 7,000 linear feet of storm sewer, 4,000 linear feet of sanitary sewer, 5,000 linear feet of water main, and other associated items. The total estimated cost for the project is $8,714,000. This project will be initially paid by the Economic Development Funds, and then will be certified as a TIF debt within the Unified Highway 58 Corridor Urban Renewal Plan. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So with that, I'll open it up for public comment on this item. Does anyone wish to speak on item 6? I'm seeing none there, and I'm seeing none on Zoom as well. So I'll consider the public hearing closed for that item and take us over to Part 6E, which is a resolution approving and adopting the plan specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the West Viking Road Industrial Park Phase 5 project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motioned.
Second.
And seconded. So open it for council discussion and questions. Seeing none, that's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us over into new business and our consent calendar. Thank you very much, Mr. Tolan. So for consent calendar, these items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately, and you're more than welcome to pull items for discussion if you like. So does council request to pull any items 7 through 9? Seeing none, does anyone from the public wish to pull an item 7 through 9? Seeing none there and none on Zoom. So I'll read those items. Item 7 is receiving and filing the City Council goal-setting report about December 7th and 9th. 8 is receiving and filing Committee of the Whole minutes for January 3rd, 2022. And item 9 is approving applications for beer permits and liquor licenses. Is there a motion to approve these items?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So those do pass. That takes us out of consent calendar and into the resolution calendar. These items will be acted upon by a roll call vote on a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Does any council member request to pull an item 10 through 15? And I'll go ahead and pull item 12.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
number 10 and number 14.
Okay.
And 15, please.
And item 15. Okay, so is that it? And does anyone from the public wish to pull 11 or 13? Okay, seeing none there. So I will read 11 and 13, and then we'll go back to review 10, 12, 14, and 15 for separate discussion. So item 11 is a resolution naming official depositories for the city of Cedar Falls. Item 13 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a contract for appraisal services with Rowley Appraisal LLC relative to the Northern Cedar Falls Flood Buyout Program. Is there a motion to approve these items 11 and 13?
So moved.
Second.
The motion and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Going back to item 10, it's a resolution approving and adopting the FY23 City Council Goals Work Program and Short-Term Financial Plan. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion and seconded, and open it for initial discussion. Councilmember Sires, you had a question or comment?
Yes, the city goals that were hashed over at goal setting, one of them went 3 to 3 to keep promoting the PSOs. I'm for a separate police and fire department. That's why I pulled that one. That's all.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Yes, Councilmember Cruz?
The comment that I saw that during goal setting, we approved to continue forward with the downtown zoning, and I believe the vote was to not necessarily do so. From what I
So do you
recall.
have a motion to strike?
Just to correct. Because the goal wasn't to move forward.
Okay, so you want to bring, what's the motion then?
To correct it to state, I think the vote was 4 to, you were online then. It was like 4 to 2, or it had been, 5 to 2.
And which line item is this?
I don't have the line item in front of me, Mr. Mayor.
So we need to know what to modify.
I don't have it. The discussion of moving forward definitively with the form-based zoning in the character district, downtown character district. 'Cause it
So
was-
is your motion to remove that entirely?
I can make it that.
Okay. So there's a motion to remove, and again, it'd be helpful to know where that's at.
I'm looking for it. Is it under that 3C4 or 3C5?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I want to correct that. It would have been a 4 to 2 vote because Mr. Sires wasn't on the phone then. He wasn't in attendance, so it would have been 4 to 2 vote.
So, yeah, the motion still stands though, correct?
Correct.
So motion, and we'll find the site but the motion is to strike form-based zoning from the council goal-setting document. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is seconded. Open it for discussion for amending to remove form-based zoning from the docket, or from the packet.
I mean, goal setting's great and all for trying to give staff a direction to go, but, you know, we talked about putting a pause on going forward with College Hill to return and fix downtown. So we didn't say that we were not going to move ahead with form-based zoning ever in the future. We just said we're going to revisit downtown and we're going to put a pause on College Hill until downtown is settled. So I don't know that I want to go as far as to say we're removing form-based zoning and stuff.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Cruz.
To Simon's, Mr. Harding's point, that the fix for the downtown does not necessarily have to include form-based zoning.
We can talk about that for sure, but that, again, that wasn't the consensus at goals. We never said, is there a consensus to not go with form-based zoning? We never had that discussion.
It's 3C5A. Support the development of a comprehensive new zoning ordinance, reference H, to replace the zoning ordinance first adopted in 1970.
Okay, which does
That's
not,
one you're talking about.
Which doesn't talk about form-based zoning at all.
Well,
Okay, I stand corrected. I repeal that motion.
okay, so the amendment is withdrawn. And we are back to our original resolution approving and adopting the FY23 goals, work program, and short-term financial plan. Any final discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add in too, I was planning to pull this item just to go on record and state that the goal-setting process is somewhat cumbersome and not easily navigable, especially for a new member, sometimes for the old as well. I have a concern that some of the old language just carries over without discussion for that consensus. So I just wanted to put on record that I plan to refer, and I'll chat with Ron to develop this, outside perspectives on how our goal setting goes so that we can kind of frame that up a little bit better. My outside perspective was that it seems like it's not council goals as much as it is, here's what you need to adhere to. And so if it was changed, I'd be more in favor of it. On Councilman Sires' point on 2C2B, we had talked about amending language there. I'm trying to find it here really quickly. Apologize for the delay. But to say that we will continue to implement and evaluate a public safety model, ensuring efficient fire suppression and policing efforts, as opposed to the exclusive language of only hiring one particular staff line. So rather than 2C2B as it stands, I would make a motion to amend to continue to evaluate the city's public safety model, ensuring cost-effective law enforcement, firefighting, and rescue operations.
Second.
A motion and seconded. Open for discussion for that amendment.
I'd like to see a lot, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Sires?
I'd like to see those struck right out, because it says public safety officers. I bet if we took a vote right now, there'd be 4-3 to bring back a fire department, separate fire department. So as goal setting, and this is kind of what had transpired with me since I wasn't there. It would have gone 4-3, and it went 3-3. It'd be nice to go ahead and strike from 2C, 2B, all the way down to 2C, 2H, and strike all of those. I'd make a motion to strike all of those, because I believe that the majority of the council wants a separate police and fire department.
Okay, so the motion, and let me know if I'm procedurally not doing something right here. I have the motion as 2C2B to 2C2H.
Yes, all those in between, yes. I believe the majority of the...
And is there a second?
Can we?
We already have one.
We already have a motion
Okay,
on the
that's where I was
floor, so
asking.
we can't make a motion within a motion,
Right, okay.
correct?
So apologize, I'm at the end of a very long day. So the original motion that's on the floor currently, if you can restate that, Madam Clerk? What we're-
I did not catch it all. Dustin, I
Sure.
assume you have it wrote down?
You assumed incorrectly. Continue to evaluate the city's public safety model, ensuring cost-effective and efficient law enforcement, firefighting, and rescue operations.
Okay, so that's the motion that's on the floor. And we'll need to vote on that one before we can entertain other motions. So any further discussion on that request to change as an amendment?
Mr. Mayor, can I just remind, didn't we agree last week that we were going to talk about public safety and all that?
We do have a
We
work
did.
session scheduled.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, we have a work session scheduled, and it was 3 to 3 at goal setting. I believe the language that Dustin has provided will lead us into those conversations to see if we want, what changes we can make and what we can get done. So,
And as I stated in goal setting too, this is less of a restrictive language so that it allows us to evaluate broadly, where our goal setting should be a broad guide. So that's why I removed the exclusive language of one particular position.
Okay, so any other discussion on that amendment?
Just that I'd rather see what Kelly was just talking about, that our intent was we're gonna talk about this in a workshop and really come on to some definitive guidelines on what we want by the model.
Okay, so with that, any other final thoughts on the amendment? It's been motioned and or seconded to amend to the language that Councilmember Ganfield specified. Does anyone need me to reread it? Okay, so all in favor of this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so let's see show of hands for aye. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nay. 1, 2, 3. So that language is added in, and I believe that would preclude, well, no, it wouldn't preclude the removal of the entire list because those are other items being discussed. So if, Councilmember Sires, if you want to continue on with that line.
Yes, I would. I'd like to make a motion to strike 2C2B all the way down to 2C2H.
Okay, so
That's
there's
my
that motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm seeing a second from Councilmember Ganfield. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so motion and second and open for discussion for the amendment.
I mean, I'm all for talking about this and going, but just, I get nervous striking all of them, and then staff has no direction, we have no plan, we have nothing. The whole point of why I really had a problem with this, and I still have an issue with the PSO system, is because I didn't feel like we had this strong plan. So why would I vote to just strike it out of goal setting and leave it up in the air without us talking about it? We've set the bar that we're going to talk about it, and we're going to move forward with that, and that could lead to some change. It could lead to eliminating. It could lead to a lot of things, but just to strike it from the goal setting document, to me, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't get us a firefighter. It doesn't get us a fire department magically that we, it just doesn't do anything. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Sires.
No, it doesn't, but what it does is this is an objective of the council. So what you're saying is you want PSOs and PSO officers all the way down here to the bottom. I don't want to take up a lot of time. If you guys don't want to vote for that, I'm in 100% for a separate police and fire department. End of story. So I fight for it all the time, and when I see something like this that I could strike, I do. But if you guys vote me down, that's fine too. Everybody gets to vote how they want.
I'll make a point too that we have the work session in the works. Was asked for by council in the last council meeting. The date on that is waiting until after a public hearing, or excuse me, a court review, a mediating session on February 2nd. That's required by court order. And once that's finished, we'll have more information, more definitive guidance on what we can do and what the requirements on the city are. So it'll be very soon after that we have that work session. So with that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So I'd just like to reiterate that people's definition of separate, we don't want the city to come away with, or citizens to come away with the impression that we're not staffed for police, or we're not staffed for fire. We have staff in place and they're at the stations, and they are fighting our fires, and the police are protecting us. So it's more of getting the definitions of how we're gonna staff them, what their training's gonna be, those things. It's not that we don't have a fire department. We do.
Okay, thank you. So what's on the floor is striking 2C2B through 2C2H in the goals document. Any final discussion? Okay, so that's the amendment that's on the floor right now. For those who wish to include this or strike these items, all those in favor of striking these items, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that fails. Those items are not stricken, and brings us back to the motion that's on the floor to approve and adopt the FY23 Council Goals Objective Work Program and Short-Term Financial Plan. Any final discussion on the main item? And is there any public question as well, any public comment? I apologize for not asking for that earlier. Okay, seeing none. Motion and seconded to approve and adopt the FY23 Council Goals Work Program and Short-Term Financial Plan. And I have to ask, did we approve the first amendment?
Yes, we did,
Okay,
4-3.
As with the amendment that Councilmember Ganfold had requested. So with that, it's been motion and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Five voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Taking us over to item 12, this is a resolution placing a temporary moratorium on the issue of building permits for construction within the Urban General 2, and storefront designations of the Downtown Character District, CDDT, zoning district until May 1st, 2022. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
A motion and seconded, open for council discussion first, or questions? And then I'll move to public comment. So any initial questions from council? Okay, seeing none, then I'll open it for public comment on this item. You have up to 5 minutes to speak on it if you wish. Okay, and I'm seeing, okay, here we are. Just name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
Deborah Lewis, 250 State Street, number 401. And I am happy to be here. It's a little past my bedtime, but as a citizen who lives in the Downtown Character District, I'm expressing my concern about the proposed resolution of a moratorium on all building permits in this district. I moved to the Downtown District over 2 years ago to live, play, shop, and dine like a local, which in turn makes my job promoting Cedar Falls as a great destination to visit much easier. The Downtown District offers a high quality of life with easy access to all amenities and leisure activities right at my doorstep. There is very little need for a motorized form of transportation with the expanded Downtown District amenities and great trail system linking us to other areas of the city and beyond. I greatly appreciate the vision our city leaders and private business owners have implemented in the Downtown District. I feel the moratorium will stifle future investment to the district for years to come. The historic Downtown District is a popular tourist attraction, drawing visitors from outside the state of Iowa. The hotel-motel tax collected annually has a direct impact on all of our quality of life in Cedar Falls. I understand there are citizens who have concerns with the current code. Please consider possible amendments instead of halting new and redevelopment in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewitt. Does anyone else from the gallery wish to speak? You, Ms. Lieber.
I'm back. Jenny Leeper, owner, landlord, and resident of 205 Main Street. Thank you for your service on the council, first of all. I know it could be a thankless job, and for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here to request that council does not implement any moratorium on new or renovated building permits or take action that would discourage new and redevelopment for the Downtown Character District, where we are in the process as owners of 205 Main Street of completing a downtown redevelopment project that has resulted in a variety of benefits for the community. This project resulted in the revitalization of a historical downtown building that was underutilized and in need of renovation. This project resulted in significant investment that was financed by one of our downtown Cedar Falls financial institutions. This project created a substantial work for a local general contractor and local subcontractors. The redevelopment of the upper level of the residential space resulted in the addition of new downtown residents from 2 families who are in the empty nest stage of life. I'm being one of those families. So we're looking to downsize and relocate after raising our children in Cedar Falls, and found appealing alternative housing in downtown Cedar Falls where we can spread our now non-child-focused disposable income. The appeal in the revitalization and continued growth of our community resulted in new residents from out of state through the sale of our longtime Washington Street home to a couple looking to move closer to their children in the Cedar Valley. The redevelopment of the lower retail space resulted in the addition of 2 businesses that are new to the Cedar Valley. This downtown development project will result in economic gain for the shops, restaurants, and bars downtown by supporting the vision of revitalization and investment in the vibrancy and growth of the downtown character district, which serves as an attractive selling point for the city of Cedar Falls. I would like to address the petition that was circulated with concerns regarding the downtown character district code. As a landlord, property owner, and resident of the downtown character district, I was not presented with the petition, so did not have the opportunity to understand the context with which this was distributed to my fellow downtown stakeholders, and therefore was not provided the opportunity for input or feedback. I would ask council to consider that not all downtown stakeholders were included in conversations shaped during the distribution of this petition, and would hope that my comments, time, and unpaid presence here tonight receive as much consideration as the signature of a non-resident property owner who enjoys the benefit of income from our downtown revitalization efforts, but has not chosen to invest and build their life in our community with an intention for the betterment of Cedar Falls as a whole. In closing, I'm asking council to address specific concerns about the downtown character district code, such as parking or protection of residential neighborhood areas, through intentional and targeted action rather than through a wholesale repeal or moratorium. Council decisions should support a vision that moves our community forward, as we are all benefiting today from the progressive planning done by those who came before us that looked to what was possible for the future of our community rather than it was comfortably served us in the past. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Lieber. Anyone else wish to speak for this item? Thank you, Mayor Brown.
Thank you. Jim Brown, again speaking on behalf of the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation, office at the Gravitate Space at 2nd and Main Street. I want to start by thanking the elected and for staff for all that you do. I know it's very difficult, not easy to do. From an economic development perspective, if someone was to ask a year ago, what's the most damage that can be done to the city of Cedar Falls just coming off COVID towards development? I think a top choice would be a discussion, a debate, and then a vote on a development moratorium in the most awarded, most celebrated, most imitated downtown in the Midwest. Figuratively speaking, we took down our open for business sign in Cedar Falls. I do believe that this council can and will take information from various stakeholders and apply your own thoughts to what's presented before you act. It seems to me the premise for this action in part was faulty to begin with. As was just mentioned, the petition was given to council of downtown stakeholders wanting something to be done with the form-based zoning and in some aspects parking. After personally receiving the petitions and talking to some of those that signed it, it was indeed a concern that they had moving forward, but did not agree with throwing out the proverbial baby with the bathwater. I believe that petition was disingenuous. Another strength I see of this council is a thoughtfulness, revisiting things that are implemented that maybe didn't work out as well as expected. I would urge the council to leave the downtown character district in place. The beauty of form-based zoning, and I wasn't a fan of that early on, is the relative ease with which to modify items, mainly because the market most likely will let you know if it's working or not. That's far better than leaving a 40-year-old zoning to political whims. More specific to what I believe is the perceived parking problem downtown, it seemed you wanted to move forward on what you think will happen without first seeing any proof it will happen. We've been talking about parking downtown at minimum for the past decade. Once again, the market is a great place to start looking to see if we have such a terrible problem. Or just walk downtown. How many empty lots or storefronts do we have? I checked last week, there's 4. A natural revolution or evolution of storefronts. Our award-winning downtown has seen incredible growth with various parking changes. But now we're being told the zoning is so egregious towards parking, there's consideration of a moratorium. It doesn't make sense and only seems political. In the recent past, there have been 2 parking studies done. The most recent was a few years ago. That plan was implemented with some pain points I think could easily have been addressed. At the time, that council did away with that because of COVID. That made sense. We didn't know where we were going to be in the next month or next couple years. My other suggestion is to bring back those solutions to parking and tweak as you go. Again, it seems we're back to the days of guessing instead of seeing what's happening. The money and expertise have been spent. Utilize that work of those professionals. Thank you again for your leadership. It does take leadership to make difficult decisions, especially without perfect information. Again, council, keep the downtown character district in place, re-implement the parking study plans, and let's please move forward, not backward. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item?
Hello again, Dawn Wilson, 3620 Round Street. I am also a business owner and property owner in the downtown district. I've been down there for 27 years, and I'm very proud of our downtown and what it's become. I've watched it grow from when the tumbleweeds were starting, moving down to where we are now. And I appreciate you listening to stakeholders' concerns and what you have done for us. But implementing this moratorium, I don't see where stopping the growth of our downtown is where it should be at. So I think you should really take that into consideration, because I've seen growth for the past 27 years, and I want to continue seeing growth downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Lieber.
Brad Lieber, 205 Main Street. I'm a business owner, also chair of Planning and Zoning. I'm not here to represent Planning and Zoning tonight, but since we have we haven't had a chance to really talk because we've missed a meeting and ex parte communications, I thought it was worth giving my personal thoughts on a little context. So the zoning code as it was before we changed it, I think I was 2 when that was approved, and I'm not a young man anymore. No comments on that, but I think there can be nostalgia and fear around change like this. And the reality is that code is a flexible document that evolves, and it's had dozens of changes to it over that time. But at some point, it's kind of like a movie star that has too much plastic surgery. They stop being recognized at some point, and it stops making sense, okay? And that's where we were. And so the reality of that is that a lot of interpretation was put out there. And there was a lot of things that weren't clear to contractors. And also, as an architect who's worked in this community for 28 years, what I know is that developers want certainty. And what our code gave them was not certainty, was ambiguity, which was open to a lot of interpretation. And I think we saw projects that went through, that took a long time to get through. And these contractors and developers are spending tens of thousands of dollars to get to the point to bring it to planning and zoning. And so I think we need to keep that in mind and not look at this with rose-colored glasses about what it was. We've had growth besides that, but at some point we got to reconsider it and rethink it. So the challenge, council challenged planning and zoning to rethink, along with city staff who did really the heavy lifting. But we, through a series of community meetings, dozens of meetings, hundreds of people, over a year process, I believe, got the community feedback about this. And I guess it's not perfect, And I guess I don't think that's the expectation. This is about consensus ultimately. And this document is going to be changed dozens of times as well over the years. And so I guess moving forward, I hear a lot of you tout the hard work that we do at planning and zoning, and we do, just like you do. And I appreciate all of that. I would ask that you give us the opportunity to let this thing evolve, to change the things that we don't like about it, but not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Finally, I would just say that, this is a bold move, I think, in this community. The greatest things that have happened to it, I think, have all been bold moves. And I would ask you to continue to think about that. We get caught up in the details sometimes, but things like CFU, the industrial park, I think this has the potential to be a bold move for the community, and I would just give it real consideration. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leeper. Anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Kittrell.
I echo that it's a lot past all of our bedtime, so I will promise to keep my comments brief. Couple things that I want to just sort of add on to. One of them is I have a lot of gray hair, and I know there are new council people. I know that there are people with varied opinions out here, and I think it's wonderful. In 25 or 30 years worth of sort of working in this community, it's nice to see that these kind of discussions are happening in the light of day. They're happening with everybody, weighing in and having their opinions on things. It hasn't always been like this. I mean, I just would point to the fact that 11 or 12 years ago when we started working in downtown, we were the third developer that tried to work down there. The first two failed. They didn't fail because there were too many problems with zoning. They didn't fail for any of those things. They failed for uncertainty. The moratorium causes uncertainty. We can't have any more uncertainty than what we absolutely have to. The job that you all have, and I've had this conversation a few times, is real estate development, and it's easy to sort of point to me and say, our company is big and we have all these things going on, but there's 50, or so people probably working on a project in downtown at any moment in time. Lots of small building owners. One of them, for example, just the very mention of this moratorium stopped a discussion about selling their building. That's not political, that's fact. So there's a discussion that we have to have. I've stood in front of this group, and we put a master plan together because there wasn't one in the zoning before. We put one together, we stood in front of this group, and it was lauded as, thank you, this is exactly the kind of thing that we need to do. And we had 7 subsequent votes as we built each one of those projects, every single one of them unanimous, 7-0. I believe when this community comes together around things, they get things done. I appreciate this discussion. I appreciate the opinions of these people, of everybody, but when we come together, we need to come together, and we need to come together with clarity and consistency. The downtown is on a roll. Yes, I believe that we're the next CFU broadband. I believe that, it could be the next great thing that this community could do. The plan that got put together was put together with literally hundreds of hours and many, many, many people working on it. The role of P&Z is to review that. There were many public sessions that were held on it. The role of this group is to look at that plan and the process under which it was put together and say, was it done appropriately? And if there wasn't a problem with the process, let's figure it out. But I believe that process was done with transparency, and I believe that all of us know that. So let's just go with that. Last thing that I would say is this whole referral in the dark of the night thing keeps me up at night. We can't have these kind of conversations coming out of left field because it's not a public discussion. When a referral is happened, I believe the referral should be made, and then the discussion should be happening with the public. not a 45-minute discussion that prejudices everybody and sets everybody's hair on fire. I cannot tell you how many, phone calls, emails, and everything else this has caused in the last week. Too many. I've said a million times, it's public-private partnerships that build communities like this. I believe you have some really good private partners, and they're wondering whether or not they have consistency and support from their public partners, and that's you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kitchell. Ms. Dara?
Good evening, Council. I too will be brief. Carrie Dara, President and CEO of Grow Cedar Valley. And it has been mentioned that we do support the Community Main Street position and all of the others that have been at the microphone, and I'm here to reiterate that. But I also want to share that of all of the issues that have come out of these council chambers since I've been President and CEO, beyond the PSO issue, beyond roundabouts University Avenue, I've gotten more feedback from companies both in Cedar Falls and Waterloo and throughout the Cedar Valley of the damage of what lobbying an idea out there can do to while we're trying to invite people to grow their business, grow their families, move here. We're a welcoming, open for business community. That's not what they heard a couple of weeks ago. So again, I support everything you've already heard. I've visited with several of you already, and I do believe these were unintended consequences when this was thrown out there, but we do need to rectify this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dara. Mr. Manning?
Good evening, Council. Bob Manning. My address is 2908 West 3rd Street, Cedar Falls. Based on the time, we ought to have the skinniest council anywhere in the state of Iowa. I mean, you started at 5 o'clock, and shoot, I would melt if I hadn't had my 2 meals in between by now. So a moratorium is defined by Webster as a pause in activity, a legal method in which to stop things from going forward. And I'd hate to think of a moratorium is listed by the council currently residing in those chairs. If we can think of the history of Cedar Falls that they'll write in the year 2050, they'll say back, remember when the council toyed with that moratorium and how it all of a sudden stopped business? I mean, that's very scary in reality of what you're considering. And please don't do that. I'm a member of the State Home Builders Association. January and February is a big planning month on what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, and how you're going to go about it. And we're cutting right into the middle of that by the word moratorium. That has such a bad ring in my ears. It scares me that this might happen tonight. It scares me that this might happen. A moratorium in Cedar Falls, Iowa, that is always seen as a progressive city with a vibrant downtown and good housing growth. Moratorium. That word scares me. We represent both commercial and residential builders. And when I was at a State Home Builders Association meeting last week, apparently the word was out around the state, and they said, Bob, you're going to have a moratorium in Cedar Falls, Iowa? From the lady from Iowa City and from the gentleman from Des Moines, Bob, you're going to have a moratorium in Cedar Falls, Iowa? You know what that'll do to your business and the confidence your business people have in you? You're going to pull the rug right out from underneath them. A moratorium? Not good. When my counterpart in Ames said, Bob, they just said you're going to have a moratorium. So all of a sudden, all 6 large home builders associations, of which we're one, we're all sitting there saying, Bob, you're going to have a moratorium? And all I could say is, we hope to speak to the council. We hope they'll hear those words that you're all saying and say, hey, that's not the way to go. Let's continue to go down the path we were and fix any of the zoning requirements and the form-based zoning that you want to improve on, but let's not do it through a moratorium. A moratorium. Please don't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, and I'm seeing none on Zoom as well. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to place a temporary moratorium on the issue of building permits for construction with the Urban General 2 storefront designations in downtown character district till May 1st, 2022. Open it for council discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
I'd like to, right off the bat here, amend this to be a repeal of the form-based zoning for downtown.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. You can't do that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
I can amend this to be...
you can't repeal, you can't repeal an ordinance on...
Okay, let me rephrase that. Let's start the process that was outlined earlier about how we would repeal this.
Councilmember Cruz, I'm going to call you out of order on this. The item that's before us, I'll read it to you again. The items before us is a resolution placing a temporary moratorium on the issue of building permits. That is what we're discussing. You can't amend it to something entirely different.
This has to do with form-based zoning in downtown character district, and I can, yes, indeed.
I'm ruling this out of order. We will not discuss that tonight.
We can discuss it because that's...
I'm ruling it out of order, and we are not discussing it.
Mr. Rogers, can you weigh in on this? Because I think we have the privilege as council to amend something on the resolution calendar as we want to, and have a vote by council.
The subject matter of the resolution was temporary moratorium. There's nothing in here about repealing the downtown zoning ordinance, so we would be violating open meetings laws if we took up this matter at this juncture.
I'm surprised you're suggesting it.
You can't just change a motion to a completely different motion.
Absolutely. Councilmember DeBreaux.
I think the reason this got on the agenda was because there was a lot of discussion on the form-based zoning and what to do to change it, or how we get it back to a meeting to be able to discuss it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Darrell, but is that, I think that's what he's trying to do, is,
right.
is how do we get it back to a meeting where we can discuss repealing it?
That is not what's on the table tonight.
I'm asking a question. Well, how do you get it on the table?
A referral. That's clear. A referral is the way to handle that process, not to hijack an existing motion.
Okay, let me finish my thought, because when we talked about it 2 weeks ago, I thought that Kevin had made a few comments regarding what we could and couldn't legally do. And it became quite confusing as to what the whole process is, as to how to go back to redo or relook at this downtown zoning ordinance. There was questions about having parts of it having to go to P. We couldn't just repeal it and send it back to, put back what we had in. That had to go through P&Z. It got to be very confusing as to what are our options.
Well, certainly I never suggested that council put forward a moratorium.
No, I didn't. I'm not saying that you did.
Please let him finish.
Yeah.
But the discussion that came about was council discussed the concern while the review process for the existing ordinance went on. Somebody mentioned something about developers going ahead under the current ordinance and concerned about getting that process started. And that's where the idea of a temporary moratorium came, to preserve status quo while that review is underway.
Right.
I think that's where this came from.
Well, there was a question that I had asked at that last meeting regarding if something wanted to go through that was allowed under the old zoning and not allowed under this, or vice versa, that's allowed under the form-based but not on the prior, what would the staff do as far as moving forward on a project, knowing that we were trying to work on that zoning ordinance? And I know I talked to Ron about that as well.
Yeah, so the staff would apply the current ordinance that's on the books.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Harding.
If you want to repeal, which I don't, the current ordinance, you could make a referral to do so, or 4 council members could get together and have it put on the agenda by contacting the city clerk. It's pretty straightforward, outlined in the policies of how to do things. The details of whether it would have to go back to P&Z and what it would do would be legally and figured out by staff. So, but our process is the same, refer it, or 4 people put it on the agenda. So I don't see why there's an issue here, personally, and I don't like that we're trying to amend something and completely throw it out and replace it with something. That's just scary to me. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, so I'm ruling that motion out of order for repealing the form-based zoning and continuing the discussion on the temporary moratorium. Anything else from council? Okay, so motion and seconded to have a temporary moratorium.
Mr. Mayor, I'd
Councilmember
like to
Cruz.
amend it.
What's that?
I'd like to amend this
Oh, please.
to have the focus of the moratorium only on new construction that has residential unit component in the downtown character district.
So new construction with the residential component.
In the urban general 2 storefront designations in the downtown character district.
Which is the same as it was before. So just the new construction with a residential focus? Okay.
Multi-use.
With a multi-use focus. Okay, is there a second for this?
Okay, what is the amendment now? It's
So-
new construction.
For building permits to strike or to add in prior to construction, new, and then permits for new construction with a multi-use focus. Is there a second? I'm not seeing a second, so that fails. And it brings us back to the original moratorium, or resolution placing a temporary moratorium on issue of building permits for construction within the urban general 2 storefront designations in the downtown character district until May 1st, 2022. And I would ask, for the sake of future development, that this be a unanimous vote against. This requires a roll call vote. Thank you very much.
All members voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
So that moratorium does fail and brings us over to item 14, which is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a service agreement with Kurt Gross Company relative to moving furniture for the City Hall remodel project. Is there a motion to approve this item? Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and seconded. Councilmember Sires, you had some comments on this?
I just have one quick question. Shouldn't this come out of the 6.4 million for the renovation? Or was this just something extra?
So for staff to be able to answer that?
It was, I believe it was $11,000 to remove furniture from City Hall.
Well, it will be considered as part of the total project budget. So
Okay.
I believe this contract was for, what was it, about 10,000 or 15,000?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, then it's been motion, anything from the public on this? So motion and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Six voting aye, one voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that takes us over to item 15, which is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement for use of city parks and services with Sturgis Falls Celebration Incorporated. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and seconded. And Councilmember DeBeer, you had questions or comments?
Yeah, I pulled this. I'm 100% for it. I have no problem with the item. I'd like to thank Jay and all of his volunteers for all the hard work they did. And I pulled it also because I know there'd been a question that Jay and I had regarding some confusing zoning on the land, and wanting to make sure that he had an opportunity to meet with Ron to see if we can get that fixed.
Okay, Mr. Stoddard, if you'd want to comment on that item?
I think the only thing we were trying to do was to get the property zoned by the way it's going to be used, and that's commercial. Right now, it's being, it's residential. So I was just wanting that to be, the property to be commercial.
Right, and there's a process for that, and I was hoping that Ron could help get that started.
Pardon me?
There was a process for getting that done, and I was hoping that Ron Gaines could help get that started for us.
Yeah, we can meet and talk about what the petition to rezone the property would be.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
My understanding is that the county records, courthouse records, it's listed as commercial?
Correct.
So how do you resolve a conflict? Do you have to do much? Can we make a motion right now to recognize the commercial? No, Roger says.
No, actually, so the actual zoning of the property supersedes what just the county would have. The county typically takes our records, and there could be some type of a Scrivener's error with regard to the zoning. I don't know.
I would just add to that you would want to clear up the ambiguity anyway, just to make sure that the records are consistent.
Would this be something that'd go through planning and zoning first before we would take action?
Yes, so any zoning changes like that always have to go through planning and zoning, and so we typically meet with the whoever the petitioner is to rezone the property, and from there actually review it and submit it to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay.
Thank you for all you do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Even though it's 10 o'clock.
Any other comments for Sturgis Falls celebration item? Seeing none, then it's been motion and second, and it requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. So that takes us out of resolution calendar and over into bills and claims. Is there a motion to approve bills and claims
So
for
moved.
January 18th? Motion and seconded. Any discussion? Any from the public? Okay, so it's been motion and second. It requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any city council referrals tonight?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Cruz.
I'd like to make a referral that we discuss the process of repealing the form-based zoning for the downtown character district.
To repeal downtown character district as a work, I'd say as a work session.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Discussion?
Could we do it at a committee of the whole meeting?
What would you have staff prepare?
The process of repealing it?
All right, so that, yeah, that could.
I mean,
staff would have enough information to be able to say what, okay, so I'm getting from Mr. Rogers?
So the technical process for repealing it is an amendment to the zoning ordinance. So council would have to amend or suggest or refer to staff to bring back a proposed amended zoning ordinance for the downtown character district that would essentially, I guess, remove all of the new provisions. However, council have to direct staff what they want in its place because we have to have zoning downtown. So maybe that's a discussion, as the mayor suggested, for work session, to give staff direction on which direction council wants to go.
If I could add to my amendment then, or my referral, that we would return to the previous ordinances that were in effect for the downtown area zoning and such.
So that could be a referral to staff to bring back an ordinance along those lines for approval or a petition to planning and zoning with those changes. I think staff would understand that referral.
Okay, so motioned.
That's a
and
motion.
The second?
I seconded it.
So open for council discussion.
So I'd like to get us straightened out with the public service model before we tackle this one, so I don't want to bump that schedule before they both need to be done, but I think we need to address the PSO first. So you had said you had thought of a schedule. Is that your consideration too, or?
I'm not sure for the staff load to be able to do both, what that would look like, since they're separate departments, so I couldn't speak to that.
That's a heavy ask, I mean, considering everything else that we have going on, but if the council figures out which its priority is, we'll go after it.
Mr. Mayor?
And I know we've, just a moment, I know we have several new council members on. And I appreciate that there's this honest desire to talk about issues and to look at and deliberate over issues and see what makes sense. But realize, even just bringing this forward, I would strongly advise voting this down unless you are intent on repealing. The amount of effort that it's going to take staff to work through this is monumental, and it will disrupt other work that we need to do in the city, including probably the public safety discussion. So unless you are heavily inclined to repeal it, I would strongly advise voting against this. Councilor Harding. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Cruz, I think was first.
One of the speakers mentioned that form-based was easy to modify, but it seems like it's awful hard to modify it. What other options do we have, as it seems like it's been very difficult to try to modify it?
Well, I think the ordinance itself is just as easy to modify as any other. So for instance, there was 2 items earlier tonight that referred back to planning and zoning. Staff will bring those to planning and zoning. They'll look at those items and then bring forward a recommendation. So that's the same process that you would use, whether it's form-based or a conventional zoning type. I think what gets to be the heavy lift is totally repealing an ordinance and trying to replace it back with the exact. That would still need to go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they would have recommendations on that as well. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Cruz.
The point of repealing is to correct some of the process problems that we've had, and the fact that we have residential and commercial former traditional zones, if I call them that were basically erased, and people lost their privileges and their protections, because everything I see and read, that form-based zoning is best suited for bare ground, where you can design everything you want to design. But what we've done here is taken form-based zoning and applied it to the area of town that's 150 years plus old, and people have lived and worked and played and enjoyed these properties, and then they're being told different things that they can or can't do, and that's where the problem lies. We can take the good things from the form-based zoning, adopt them to our traditional zone, make it a hybrid zone and zoning districts, and we could have the best of both worlds.
We haven't even tried this world yet, so how do you know? That's the whole thing, is that we go around in circles, and I'm starting to, I understand Kelly's frustration, as, not to reference your frustration, sorry.
You can reference.
We did exactly what you said last time. Let's have a work session. We said some people had an issue with the shared parking. Okay, let's refer it back to planning and zoning. They're going to come back, and hopefully we can compromise and move forward with that. And then we said, well, let's take back some of the parking things. Okay, good. We're working together. We're taking some things that were controversial, and we're fixing them to make as many people happy as possible. And now all of a sudden, we want to throw everything out and redo it because there was process issues. The process, I've watched a lot of things since I've moved here, and the process on this was long, and there were lots of planning and zoning things, and there were really 2 contentious items: the shared parking and the
Planning and zoning is one.
and yeah, well, so 3 planning and zoning. There were a couple, 2 to 3 contentious items, And now we're looking at those and revisiting and compromising and sending them back. And I think that's great. That's what we're here for. Why don't we continue on that course and revise a few things? If we go this course of repealing and doing all this and restarting over and doing all this, you're sending out a bad message to developers. You're sending out a message to the rest of the state that we're closed for business. Again, you say that, but people have called constantly on this one. I've gotten so many calls on how we're not friendly to, I mean, it's going to have unforeseen repercussions. We don't need to have the conversation now. Like Mr. Kittrell said.
I'd say that we're not looking at unforeseen consequences at this point. From what we saw tonight, we are looking at very foreseen consequences of taking an action to even talk about repealing this zoning ordinance. Unbelievable to me.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Cruz.
in November and December, we tried numerous amendments to discuss, and the only concern that the people that were voting for it was, is that a substantial change? Is it going to go back to planning and zoning? Instead of talking about the item, as would have been proper, in many people's minds, and the quote is they pushed it through or rammed it through, or it was just whatever word you want to use, and that's not proper.
We talked, sorry, go ahead.
And I stand by what I'm asking here, because a lot of people do not like the result of form-based zoning. You can't build a building and then decide, oh, we goofed, and then take off a couple floors. You can't do that. So you can't try it for a while. I've said, and I've seen this researched, that the form-based zoning is based on mass transit to get lots of people into an area and out on trains, subways, some fashion.
What's your source?
It's right in the preamble to the document that we got from Farrell Madden. I read it out loud. Walkability, bikeability, and mass transit. And we don't have mass transit. So that's a flaw right in the beginning of it. So there's concerns by a lot of people here that when you build, you're taking away spaces for residential people that don't have parking, or the customers that want to attend the new bars, restaurants, and shops. They're going to take the spaces away from the other ones that have been there for 30 years, shops and restaurants. There's a concern.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Dunn.
We're addressing that. We've already addressed, we're talking about parking again. Can we call the question? I mean, it's 10:15. Can we call the question?
There's no objections to calling the question.
It's a vote to do that.
There is a vote. It's got to be
Okay.
2/3, right?
All right, so calling the question?
No debate.
No debate, okay. So is this a roll call to call the question or a voice vote?
Voice vote.
So,
It's a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
So the motion is to call the question. We have to do that now.
We have to vote on call to question.
That's what we're voting on.
Okay.
Voting to end debate.
And what does that mean?
So to call the question and actually vote on the item requires a voice vote, 2/3 majority.
Right.
All in, right?
Did we have a second? I don't know.
Is there a second to call the question?
Second. I second it.
To call the question, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I didn't get a vote from, or I didn't hear a vote.
well, if I can ask, I guess what are we talking about? To stop the discussion? Is that the terminology?
And vote, yes,
all
I'm
for
sorry.
that.
Okay, yeah, calling the question means we end debate and we move straight to the vote.
Okay.
Okay, so,
So that was unanimous.
what's that?
That was unanimous.
Okay. So we will call the question, and
Could you please reread the motion on the floor to vote on?
I can try. Motion to refer to discuss to City Council as a work session, a process to remove, or what's the term? Repeal the zoning ordinance down for the downtown character district.
And return to the previous code.
And return to the previous zoning. So is this a voice or my brain shot at this point? Voice or?
Voice vote.
Yeah. So all in favor of moving to refer this, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, let's see a show of hands. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Process to repeal. And opposed? 1, 2. So that does pass to move to staff to refer for repeal of the downtown character district. Do we have any other referrals tonight?
I don't have a referral, but I don't want to miss this opportunity, so I don't want to take it away. And I know it's late, but can we remind, there was a conversation, or I think maybe an email that came out from a commissioner, I believe, about with the COVID numbers and public meetings and having the opportunity for folks to do it on Zoom without a majority in person. Can we visit that and why that's not possible?
So I guess it's appropriate to comment. It's not really a agenda item. Maybe this is a question whether a referral be appropriate. So I don't think a referral is necessary because we believe that it would be an illegal electronic meeting if fewer than a quorum of the members of the Board or Commission met in person. And a lot of the reason for that is earlier in the pandemic, Governor Reynolds did in one of her emergency proclamations, she did away with the necessity of a certain showing in order for boards and commissions and this body, in fact, to do that. Once that was removed, we have to believe that Governor Reynolds' actions were intentional. And so when she took that away, it intended to mean that that we would have to meet the statutory requirements for an electronic meeting. And so that's why we have to have a quorum in person at the meeting place to conduct a lawful meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Cruz.
it would be, I don't know if it's a referral or a question or a combination of both, I guess, but to expand our online council meeting storage capacity, because we go back to January of 2018. I don't know how we picked that date or anything. I'm told that we have our recordings somewhere in the cloud or file cabinet. What does it take to expand further back, that we don't lose the flavor of the discussion as we're having tonight? We can read minutes that are online, but to have recordings, which I think are critical.
I know we've asked that question before in years past. I can sure check with Julie, and if nothing else, I can send an answer out to all the council members, because I think it wasn't just about the storage. It was how do we go back and actually spend the time and the hours to get those back on. So I can get that for you. And if you want me to just send it out as a email answer to everybody, or bring it to the next council meeting, happy to do either one.
Certainly. With our new technology, with the remodel, or I guess the capacity of the building to do new things, and we're also evaluating new technology for the city, that would be the time now to see how far back we can go, or do we just keep storing as January 2018 the first date and keep on going for 10 years, 15 years, whatever?
Sure, so I think maybe you have like a twofold question. Is it maybe going forward, is there extra cost about the storage to keep more years? But also asking, what would it take to go back and put back on things from like 17, 16, 15? Is that what, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Okay.
What was I going to say? Is there a policy, or are we going to just indefinitely keep January 2018 as our starting point? Or will they drop off after X years? What's the plan?
I'll have that as part, that's why I was making sure that it was kind of a two-part question, so. Yep.
Any others? Council updates for tonight? Okay, do we have any staff updates tonight? Seeing none?
No, sir.
And so that will bring us to executive session, item 18.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, or excuse me, this requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So council will resume after executive session.
You're over in the detail.